OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Very good morning to you. Welcome along to this morning's OTB AM. We're here with you all the way until 9:30, and boy, do we have a show for you today. We're going to look at the inner workings of Manchester City. We're going to find out if the Aviva is for sale. We're going to speculate wildly about what's going on with the Dublin manager's job and whatever else you're having this morning. Hashtag OTB AM to get it off your chest. So at 7:31, we say good morning to Eoin. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you keeping?
I'm very well. What's going on?
There isn't much going on, to be honest with you.
What? The stadium's for sale.
Okay.
The Dubs have no manager.
Okay.
There's chaos in Manchester City.
Chaos Manchester City.
That's not how you sell the opening of the show.
There's also another Mayo story. There is lots going on.
The Mayo stories. They just keep coming. Mayo leaks.
Mayo leaks, right. There's the Irish Independent this morning. The emotion perhaps being brought to table that bullying culture needs to be investigated, which is always...
a great look for a county board.
Not a great look. And who's going to investigate the bullying claims? Are the Mayo executive going to investigate themselves?
Well,
it's the question you always have regarding that. No, there is tons going on. And actually, to be honest with you, Ger, I was going through... it just kind of hits you, like Christmas FM is back on, you start to hear Christmas songs, you start to see Christmas lights up, and then there's just a ton of football. Just like, you just have to gorge your way through the next 4 weeks. And then you got all these administrative stories as well, and it's absolutely fantastic.
With drool coming out of your mouth.
It's going to be a blockbuster, carb-loaded December full of scandal, intrigue, and a bit of
It's pretty early to be getting into the whole Christmas thing, but I've already been at 2 Christmas functions. And the boom is back, baby, I'm telling you.
I've been at 0 Christmas functions, so...
The boom is back.
Speak for yourself.
Normally they have like a little glass of Prosecco or whatever. It was actual proper champagne at these things that I was at. I was like, hang on a second now. This is the canary in the gold mine, and the canary's just fallen over and keeled over and dead. Well,
you're going to have to explain to the pauper like me, where is Prosecco on the spectrum and where is champagne on the spectrum? Are they widely apart? Is Prosecco bust and is champagne boom?
Yeah, exactly.
That far apart? I would have thought that they were like cousins.
Prosecco and Cava were basically invented in the bust in Ireland. It was like, oh, hang on a second, we can get just as pissed off this, and it doesn't cost anything.
Tastes the same.
And it comes from like nice parts of Spain and Italy.
Like I would say, save a bit of money.
Yeah.
If the FAI want any advice, cut the champagne at the AGM this year, replace it with Prosecco.
Was it 69 grand they spent on or 59 grand? What was the figure that they spent on?
Oh, it was definitely 69 grand.
On the 50th?
100% 69 grand. No, 100% remember that. Nice. Very nice amount of money spent on John Delaney's birthday bash.
Although he paid back 60 of it, right? So it was only 9 grand in the end that I think, was the... When you drill down into the story, the headline was accurate.
I was only interested in the headline.
On the night itself. Will we get into the FAI story? Because it turns out that UEFA have come in and they've had a look at the books. Obviously, UEFA at the moment are bankrolling the FAI. And they've essentially said, we'll continue to bankroll you, but hang on a second, what assets do you have that you might be able to realise some cash for? You know, not guaranteed, lads, that you're going to make it to the Euros. It's just not guaranteed. Although now that we owe UEFA a lot of money, they're less likely to screw us in the refereeing stakes, aren't they? Aren't they?
It's a possibility.
We're all like, you know, if I watch some mafia movies, I see how this works. We're into them for a lot of money.
Yeah, like what's the Juventus legend who's on the executive committee, Boniek?
Yeah.
He was saying yesterday when he was asked about this, I'm not interested in these sort of stories, I'm only interested in good footballing stories. You sit on the UEFA executive committee, this is literally your job.
Maybe
to be concerned about stories like this. So they're not interested in Ireland having problems. So you're right, there should be every help under the sun provided to Ireland. And maybe John Delaney's wish for a replay back in 2009 can actually be realised in the year 2020, in March 2020. You wouldn't get a replay back then, buddy, but we'll give you some very favourable refereeing decisions in Bratislava and in Belfast.
We'd take some of that, and there's no VAR, is there?
Good question. I don't think there is, unless they were to renew it mid-campaign, because there certainly wasn't for the rest of the campaign. So, yeah, like I would take that. I would take Euro 2020 place and brush everything under the carpet and just let that carpet sit there and fester until the problem gets even worse in a couple of years' time.
The boffins at UEFA, I think is the phrase, or the bean counters rather, decided that the only asset that they have is a share of the stadium, which they don't actually own. They have a lease on the stadium, a 60-year lease on the Aviva. At which point it reverts back to the IRFU. So how much it would actually be worth and how many buyers there are out there in the world for a timeshare on a stadium for the next, what is it? Is there 45 years left? Is it 15 years since the Aviva started? Maybe is it 10 years since the Aviva started?
About 10, isn't it?
So, one obvious buyer would be the IRFU.
The most obvious, I would have thought.
Yeah, who could probably, negotiate quite hard on price at the moment.
The ball is firmly in their court at the moment.
You're a bit broke and you want to sell us the thing that we... Oh, okay. What happens if we don't buy it?
Because, I would imagine that... I don't really remember the ins and outs of the kind of dual sharing agreement to building the Aviva Stadium, but I'd imagine this was a big moment of pride for the FAI that they no longer had to lease a stadium from the IRFU, who of course previously owned Lansdowne Road.
Yeah.
And actually getting to kind of be family members in the ownership of the Aviva Stadium was a good move forward. So this would damage the pride to no end of the FAI, I would imagine.
Well, it was supposed to be their way out of the financial strictures that had always held football back in this country. And instead it became a millstone around their neck because of the overly aggressive pricing around the Vantage Club, which was obviously the season tickets and the corporate boxes and all that kind of stuff for the football matches. So in the end, it has not been something that has thrown off loads of cash. It's been the opposite. They've been spending their time servicing the debt. And that hasn't worked out.
It certainly hasn't. I would be surprised if this option is entertained anytime soon. For the reason that I listed, I think that this is an organisation that prides itself on its pride quite often. The FAI shouldn't be the case because they don't have a hell of a lot of it left. But when they consider the possibility of actually giving back their share to the IRFU, which is what this could be framed as, even though they'll make a bit of profit, I just can't see the current top brass perhaps settling for it. You've got to ask yourself the question, would John Delaney do something like this, sell half the share of the Aviva Stadium to the IRFU? I think the answer would probably be no, because it's the FAI share, and we all know that there are still a lot of people associated with Delaney still involved in the FAI, so we can't expect any new, different decision making. So I'd be surprised if this happened, but UEFA will probably start pushing this, because it's their idea. This is where the story has come from. This is not inside the FAI. It's
an idea that the UEFA have put forward. So we don't know exactly how far they're pushing it. I presume there's a range of different things. Some of it's going to be very unpalatable. Some of it's going to be cutting teams. Some of it's going to be cutting spending. Some of it's going to be cutting programmes. Who knows exactly what the rest of the ideas they've come forward for. But the problem is that there's no leadership in the FAI. There obviously is a president who's part of the old board and who, therefore, by definition, seems to be part of the problem, certainly when it comes to the thinking of the Irish government and the restoration of funding. Restoration of funding, by the way, is a drop in the ocean compared to the amount of debt that they have anyway. So it's really around some specific programmes, and it looks like most of the funding is probably going to be restored for that through a third party anyway. But yesterday they were supposed to have a new CEO. John Foley, ex-Athletics Ireland, had been talked about. It was in the ether for months and months and months. Finally the name started to get mentioned in the last few weeks, kind of like, oh, this is a done deal. And then yesterday was like, no, don't want this job. I don't want this job.
But it kind of came out of the blue, the whole Foley thing, didn't it?
Which bit? That
he was actually going to get the gig. I may have been sleeping under a rock, but I'd heard no positive sounds or concrete sounds really from the FAI over the past few weeks that this is what was going to happen once Mooney's secondment ended. This all felt like one big news story. He is going to be interim CEO, and he isn't going to be interim CEO. This all happened at once.
Sorry, not really.
Maybe there was mention of it.
Yeah, there was. Certainly in the over the last few weeks, there have been like, oh, somebody's being lined up.
Well, there was no official statement from the FAI. That's
no, it was never confirmed. It was absolutely never confirmed by the FAI, because, I mean, it would be silly to confirm something that hasn't actually happened just yet.
I guess that is true.
In essence, they were right not to confirm it, because in the end it didn't happen. So
I'll give them that one.
In the Star, Eamon Dunphy's calling for a new football body, and he's right. It's like maybe that's the right thing to do here, is to go, right, football in Ireland, it's over, it's restarting. We're not calling it the FAI anymore, we're calling it Football Ireland, or I don't know, whatever.
When you think about who's the possible candidate to become CEO, and not even the specific names, the person that might do it, like David Kelly in the Irish Independent says the CEO should be first among equals, which is correct. But where's the drawing power for that for anybody who wants to come in? Like the title CEO even suggests power, it suggests a high salary. But we know that when we throw power and we throw money around in Ireland, bad things tend to happen. So something needs to change. People need to almost go in and park the ambition to earn extremely high amounts of money and wield a lot of power as a result of it. It needs to be almost a bit of a vocation to Irish football if we actually want to see this role last into the future. But
you could definitely put together a board of people who are interested in Irish football and who are doing it vocationally, who have already made money. And it would not be that hard to find those people. They are actually out there and ready and willing to make a contribution to Irish football. But the difficulty is that it seems like it's a nest of vipers, and there's no unity, there's no togetherness. There's no sense of there being an organisation, and here's our philosophy, this is what we're trying to do. Everybody has to either do their part or step back. Here's my little part of the community, and I'm going to protect that, and I'm going to try and get as much funding as I possibly can, and that funding is a zero-sum game, so every penny I get is a victory for me over you, and we're in competition as opposed to bring together the different disparate strands. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, and it is as big a shit show as I can remember from the multiple shit shows going all the way back to the Greek tout selling tickets from the back of his car, which was the first of the... Well, sorry. I mean, obviously I don't go back to the time that we had a home European Championships playoff and we sold the home venue to have the game in Paris against Spain. Don't remember that.
That wasn't great.
Before my time.
It's just the longevity of this thing. We're going on 9 months now. We're coming up to the 9-month anniversary in, what is it, 2 weeks' time? So just under 9 months. It's just me.
Is it not longer? It's the Gibraltar game.
Sorry, I'm going Paddy's weekend when the injunction was taken against the Sunday Times. So
Yeah,
that actually goes a bit further back before that. So we are over into 9 months. Like, just in terms of kind of other things mentioned, like the information around what John Delaney is going to be get as a severance package is going to emerge now over the next couple of weeks. Like the AGM on December 28th. How much faith are we putting in this meeting to actually give us all the answers? You know, to park the gorging of the carb-fueled December that I mentioned earlier on, to actually go onto a news website and...
Quick trip to the vomitorium, and then afterwards
update us on the FAI. What are we going to see? Are we going to see exactly what the severance package is? Because the total could be up to €500,000, according to the newspapers this morning. And then the other thing, just regarding the CEO, like this has been mentioned a couple of times before, and it kind of comes into your idea as well, that the FAI have been urged to appoint 4 independent directors before actually getting around to the process of appointing a CEO. I'm not sure is there strength in numbers there, that if you have 4 independent directors, and I'm not sure, do you hire from within, do you hire externally, but there may be a situation where they can't all be bad.
Well, they're not supposed to be from within, that's the whole point of the independence. They're not supposed to have any connection, but like it's very hard to find people who have no connection but who'll also be relevant. Right, let's move on, because we'll come back to this a little bit later on in the papers. It's dominating the front and the back pages. A little bit later on this morning, we also have this.
It's spinning! It's spinning! Jonathan Sexton!
Hang on, is that not cheating? Is that not... Are there like 16 of those versions? Or
I would hope so.
Olympic champion, I've dreamed of this moment so many times before.
Right, so there are several. Are there?
Been known for being cheats. Will always be cheats. Amateur boxing stinks. From the core right to the top.
So we have at least 3. They must be the favourites.
Has a lost ball. There is a goal! Robbie Brady!
I love the way we've just kind of blown all these. These are supposed to have impact when we bring
rate them.
head. Who won yesterday? I didn't listen to Off the Ball last night at 8:30. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't even see who won.
74% Shane Long versus Germany. 26% Meath versus Louth. The ghost goal. The case for the Meath Louth ghost goal got better and better as the day went on.
I'm going on strike.
74-26. Shane Long through to the quarterfinals. Shane Long is on fire. So that was it. You can vote on Instagram. Follow Off the Ball on Instagram, or you can also, of course, vote on Twitter. And we have another Twitter poll coming your way a little bit later on.
8:30. It will go live. It's a big one today. We're not going to reveal it just yet. Oh yes, there we are. We are going to reveal it right now. There is the O'Donovan brothers.
The Rio Derby.
Pat Hickey getting arrested. That is the Rio Derby. It is going to be live at 8:30, and we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into what happened on that week. John Duggan was in Rio.
We obviously revealed this on last Friday when you were doing the hot balls. On Friday
I did
morning.
actually do the draw last week. I momentarily forgot what actually I did last week.
Right, time for the paper. Oh, here's what's coming up, yeah. So, sports pages, Man City. Going to try and find out a little bit about what Mikel Arteta actually does. Is he just putting out the cones man, or is he the the evil genius behind the style of play, who's actually pushing Pep on a day-to-day basis. And what role does Giovanni Van Bronckhorst have in all this? We'll find out around about 8:05 this morning. Selling the Aviva, is it for sale? Dan McDonald's going to join us around about 8:15. Sports news. Then it's Hickey versus O'Donovan in the capable hands of John Duggan, coming your way at 8:45. Ewan MacKenna has written a new book about Conor McGregor. That's coming your way. I'm going to talk to him about that at around about 9:05 this morning. And you can tweet us using the hashtag OTBAM. Time for the papers.
OTB AM.
Yeah, so two of the biggest jobs in Irish sport are empty at the moment. The Dublin football manager and, of course, the CEO of the FAI. And that's the back page headlines. On the Star this morning, it's FAI restart CEO search, and Cullen, so difficult to follow Jim. It's Kieran Cunningham story, speaking with Paddy Cullen, saying how it's a bit of a poison chalice actually following Jim because the pressure and the expectations are so high. Leo Messi, we haven't mentioned it this morning, a 6th Ballon d'Or. Messi gets a 6-pack. They brought them all out, and Virgil van Dijk was finished second in that one. And Silva Bullet, not just yet though. Marco Silva has been given the opportunity to take the team for the game this weekend. Is that because they haven't done a deal with David Moyes? Is that because they can't hammer out the terms on his return? Is that, or they think that Marcus Silva's going to turn around?
Perhaps they're so haunted by the prospect of David Moyes returning that they've actually come to the realisation that most of the great work he did with this club was in a different decade.
I mean, it was.
But I'm still clinging to the notion that they can just wander back in and rediscover that romance that they once had.
Yeah, they can't. That's not how it works. Never go back. FAI's Panic Monday. Did you get it?
I get it.
What is it?
It's Manic Monday.
Hey, you know what Manic Monday is, I'm not sure, Sometimes these cultural references, they go over our heads. Football meltdown. Interim CEO Foley's bombshell, no to job. FAI's share of Aviva may have to be sold. And Dunphy, it's time for a new football body.
The Irish Examiner sports section this morning. Flat out, Joseph O'Brien making his way as a quality, not quantity trainer. That is the interview they're leading with in the Examiner this morning. Colin Sheridan is writing about Jim Gavin. Self-determination in sport is a rare thing, but Gavin managed it. FAI in limbo. Foley steps away from interim CEO role, while Screen Test, Amazon, potentially changing the way we watch football, asks another column in the Examiner this morning. They're screening tonight, tomorrow and Thursday night's games in the Premier League in the UK. Down to a T, Christmas gift ideas for the golfer in your life. And zero tolerance, Irish jockeys cop hefty bans for drug use.
Right, so Mark McCadden has done the 5 contenders for the FAI's top job, and they're interesting. So he's got Paul Cook, who used to be the managing director of the Star, so obviously the lads in the Star would know him very well. Then he was part of the consortium that bought the Business Post, and recently he has been appointed vice president. So it looks like he's probably on track for a different role within the FAI, and maybe the natural successor to Conway. But who knows? Maybe he would step away from that and become the executive. Gary Keegan is a left of centre, left field candidate as opposed to left of centre, but would be brilliant because obviously he's the man who revolutionised Irish boxing and by extension introduced the whole concept of high performance to Irish sport in a meaningful way, which every sport has essentially taken on, and Sport Ireland have used that as a blueprint. So you can't really underestimate the power of Gary Keegan. Niall Quinn, obviously everybody knows his credentials. He has said that he wouldn't take the gig. But at the same time, that was in the past, and maybe now there's enough distance. Sarah Keane, obviously working with the Olympic Federation of Ireland, and has transformed Swim Ireland. But maybe, she's just coming into the period where she's fixed the Olympics in Ireland, and I'll be like, I'm sorry, but your shit show's too much. I know all about this. I've fixed it, and I'm going to have some time building the Olympic sports in Ireland. At the same time, she'd be an incredible candidate, so if she did get the gig, that would be great as well. And then Richard Shakespeare, who's the Assistant Chief Executive at Dublin City Council, a UCD stalwart, it says here, elected onto the FAI board, one of 2 League of Ireland seats at the July AGM in Trim, and is a popular figure within Irish sport, so also unbelievably capable and knows exactly how politics in Ireland works as well, so would obviously probably be well got within government. And so any of those candidates, it turns out there's loads of people out there who could actually do this job.
Yeah, it's hiring from within obviously is something that everybody's kind of terrified at the moment, and there's obviously a list of candidates there that provide a couple of options outside the tent. Like Sarah Keane is always a name that pops up, but she can't fix every terrible situation in Irish sport. There's almost like a...
That would be the trifecta.
I mean this in the nicest way possible, but there's an air of give the job to Sam Allardyce at the end of the season about Sarah Keane's name. And I know that Sam Allardyce hasn't always turned things around, but it's always a handy name to throw out there. If she took the FAI reins, you'd probably imagine that things would turn around significantly. But as I say, she can't do anything. Time is finite. Back page of the London Times is Pochettino saying, "I'm open to offers now." You've got Lionel Messi there with his Ballon d'Or. England hatch Ashes ball plan, and Liverpool draw Everton in the FA Cup.
Pochettino's available and wants a gig. If only there was a big gig available that wanted Pochettino.
Well, there is a big gig available that wants Pochettino, but there is a big profile in Pochettino that doesn't want to screw up his own management career. So he's going to choose wisely. Just because he wants a gig doesn't mean he wants a terrible gig. So Pochettino's not going to become Arsenal manager, I dare say. Which is a shame. Breaks my heart to say it, because it could be such a happy thing. First North London derby win over Spurs would be a great moment for every Arsenal troll that's ever existed. And you can be sure and certain that I would turn into one of those trolls. But other available opportunities, like when the Manchester United hierarchy pick up their newspaper this morning and they see that Mauricio Pochettino is interested in getting back into football management, they need to sack Solskjaer immediately.
Man United now.
They just need to make this happen. It's a shame. I like the guy. He's a nice man, but his recent record is terrible. Like Van Gaal, Mourinho, even David Moyes over a 22-game period.
They all have better squads. Then, like, he's actually taken the effort to renew the squad, put some faith in youth. Like, he's building something. There's a theory behind what he's doing. With Moyes, it was like, oh my God, this job's far too big. Look at all those important, famous players. With Van Gaal, it was like, I'm Lewis Van Gaal. I can do whatever I want.
On the building thing, it was interesting. There was a conversation on Match of the Day too on Sunday night, which is almost reminiscent of your conversation with Gary Breen after Ireland's draw with Denmark.
There was a former pro who was wrong, was there? Is that what happened?
They were discussing the idea of what is the plan, what is the on-field philosophy, or how are you going to go about winning games? And there was just a general air of confusion in the studio. So if that is what the Manchester United plan is, well then I'm sorry, but well. Actually, you know what? Good luck to them. Good luck. If that's the plan that they want to proceed with, it doesn't matter what the age profile is of the squad. If that's the way they want to kind of go about things, but they have a manager who doesn't actually have a clear identity of what way they're going to go about winning matches. Especially when Mauricio Pochettino is there on the sidelines saying, "Pick me. I'm available. I want to go back into management."
Yeah. Well, look, it's like everybody missed out on Klopp because they weren't ready to sack their managers at the time. Man United had a manager that they thought was the right manager for them, and Arsenal had a manager that they thought was the right manager for them. Jurgen Klopp was like, "Oh, I'm taking a few months off," and Liverpool were like, "Okay, let's go. Come on, let's go." And this is going to happen again with Pochettino in a year and a half's time. We'll be like, "Oh, we should have got Pochettino, shouldn't we?" And it's, well, I have no sympathy if you don't. I also have a little bit of sympathy for Solskjaer, like being the one whose job it is to break things. So they should keep him in the job. They should give him the director of football role, or maybe not, because he'd just be looking over his shoulder. He'd be looking over the shoulder, of Pochettino. Well, I wouldn't have done that, Poch. Shut up.
Well, it would be a shut up. Solskjaer looking over your shoulder is not like Alex Ferguson looking over your shoulder.
Exactly, in fairness, but if he's signing the players, the Irish Times this morning has an interesting story from Sean Moran, who's in Abu Dhabi for the PwC All-Stars trip. And David Goff is unconvinced about the viability of the new mark. This is interesting because obviously he's going to be one of the referees implementing it. We, umpires as well as referees, have a good understanding as match officials of what 13 metres is, but now we're being asked to judge 20 metres. The added difficulty with that is that when we're asked as referees to judge on 13 metres, the ball is always stationary. It's really, really difficult. And also with the markings on the field during the National League, it's incredibly wet and it's very rare you'd have good days for football in Ireland. You can't see where the lines are, you've got no idea where the ball is being kicked out. I can see important decisions being made by referees which will be shown to be incorrect on TV when they take out their arrow and measuring tape.
He's right. He's right. That's exactly what's going to happen. There just needs to be an acceptance from people who are judging the referees that they're going to get this wrong, because it is literally an impossible task to police this accurately. There is no, like, I'm trying to think of any other sport where such a thing exists, where a specific measurement is required to be taken by the naked eye. It just doesn't happen. Like, there is always a very binary thing to rules. You're either right or you're wrong. You're either offside or you're onside. This is something that you can't identify with your eye.
He's saying exactly the same thing as well, and that another problem here is the amount of decisions that they have to make. The crowd don't really fully understand the rules. Players, he says, have got a bit better, but they're still not as good at understanding the rules as you'd like. During the National League trials this year, I was one of the referees caught out a good few times awarding the advance mark even though the ball hadn't been kicked outside of the 45-metre line. So I wasn't concerned with the player taking the kick, and it was the linesman who had to inform me that the ball hadn't been delivered from outside the 45. Because you've got to go, this guy, is he in the right spot? And this guy, is he in the right spot? And you're running from one spot to the other all the time, making sure that like people aren't dragging and hauling it. They've made it complicated to try and rescue the game that didn't need rescued.
Well, it would be interesting if they started this process now after the 2019 season, because it's certainly been better than the previous 2 years that we've seen in football, and they may not have been as dramatic. The only solution, really, if you want to actually police this accurately, is do what the NFL do and just have the imaginary lines constantly moving, the person in possession, the person who's receiving possession, and then just somebody on VAR quickly telling the referee that didn't travel. But imagine that, like that's a dystopian sort of future for GEA, even at inter-county level. So I don't know, like, it just needs to be policed with a clear line, as in, if you kick the ball from outside the 45-metre line and you're inside the 21 and you catch it, there you go, there's your mark, or something like that. That's what it needed to be. I like the fact that it is all inside or maybe from inside your own half to inside the 45.
No other mark available. So if the line is halfway, so basically we could be here and I could kick it to you and you could go, mark.
Okay, that wouldn't work. Like I was going to say, like from one segment of the pitch to the other, but the segments aren't equally spread out. So I don't know, and pitches are different sizes everywhere, which is also the other thing. So it's going to be fun, as in it's not going to be fun whatsoever.
He says players are also faking head injuries to insist that play gets stopped immediately, and it's a yellow card sanction. No one used it because, like, what if they do have a head injury? What if you're the one who's like, oh, I've got a brain injury and you give me a yellow card? You know, that's not a great look, is it?
No, you don't want to be that referee, that's for sure. This is... It is turning into a game which is increasingly tough to police, and it was never an easy one in the first place.
This matter is also of relevance in the context of the new punishment for black card infractions. It has been disclosed the clock won't stop for injury delays during the 10 minutes of the sin bin.
Well, that's just stupid. Like that.
So, I've got what's wrong with you? Oh, it's an adductor. It's not even, that's the wrong part of your body. Oh, I've got a brain injury. Can I just lie here for 4 minutes? Oh, Mark, sin bin's up.
Or just if it's your home ground, kick the ball into the stands and make sure somebody in the terraces just holds onto the ball for 10 minutes.
No Jose Mourinho ball boy.
No, it's that's something that they needed to change. Like that, it's not even just to do with the sin bin. I think it'd be a better function anyway to just have a hooter system and just have it on a kind of a very concrete clock, and that's what obviously women's football has done in recent years. And I just don't see any downside to it, even if it is only at the top level of the game that it's implemented.
He also says that they run 11 kilometres a game, referees, which is more than some players. So not an easy gig.
No, and the second referee is also the other thing that needs to be addressed here.
He's saying he doesn't want one, doesn't want a second referee.
Why?
He's saying the fascinating thing about refereeing is that we're all trained the same and all trying to implement the same rule, but we all have different personalities, and that's the cause of inconsistency. You could end up with one referee refereeing the game entirely different in one half of the field and another in the other. It would cause mayhem. We're trialling, though.
We're trialling, and if those inconsistencies can be narrowed towards a greater sense of consistency, that'll be good. The back page of the Irish Daily Mail is countdown. Dubs will take just 10 days to find their new manager. 6th of the best for Messi. There he is with his Ballon d'Or last night. And Carberry on track for a Christmas comeback. So they are earmarking Thomond Park on December 28th. That's the Leinster game for Munster. And Joey Carberry to make his return to action.
What else have we got?
We've got the Sun this morning. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, United boss, fears sack if he loses to Jose and Pep. He's told his players he will be axed if they lose against Tottenham and Manchester City this week. So is that more of a reason for Manchester United players to try, or less of a reason for Manchester United players to try? It's hard to know.
Surely they are on his side, no? The young lads especially?
A red alert on Poch. He's issued a come and get me plea to Europe's top clubs. Ballon d'Or, Lionel Messi making history by bagging a record 6th Ballon d'Or. And Guardiola won't buy. Pep Guardiola says Manchester City will not spend in the new year in a bid to catch Liverpool. They're 11 points behind Jurgen Klopp's leaders at the moment.
Right, the Ballon d'Or, that's Leo Messi on the front. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of his Ballon d'Ors there. Joshua's 60 million gamble. British boxer risks losing everything in the desert. This is the fight in Saudi Arabia at the weekend that I think it's actually on at a reasonable hour, isn't it? Like 8 o'clock or something.
9 o'clock, I think, is ring walk.
Is it?
I stand corrected.
He's getting 60 million for this, and the headline is Joshua has everything to lose despite 60 million payday. It's a very Telegraph take on things, isn't it? You're losing everything, I'm giving you 60 million.
Well, his career is over if he loses.
Yeah, but he's got 60 million quid. The whole point of his career is to get rich.
And
he's rich beyond his wildest dreams.
To be fair, even if he wins, he may even just target the two boys in Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, beat them, and then trot off into the sunset, and that could be done by the end of 2021 or something like that. So we're probably looking at the last embers of Anthony Joshua. The thing is, that money can.
I know he can be like, he's such a brilliant character to beat that he'll definitely get money for a Wilder fight, and he'll definitely get money for a fight against like anybody at that level. Tyson Fury, surely.
Even if he loses, you're saying?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it's possible. I guess, yeah, what is the difference between him actually going into those fights as a victor of the Ruiz fight this weekend and going in as a loser? I guess there is no difference, especially to your health. Like, he has mentioned the money thing, it has come up, and he's been fairly straightforward about the whole Saudi Arabia element and all of this fight, saying, you know, I have to sometimes park anything because this is my career. We've seen fighters in the past, especially even during the golden era of heavyweight boxing, losing everything they have, they don't have much money at all, and that is what I live by whenever there may be a moral decision or whatever to actually fight in a country like Saudi Arabia. So.
Yeah, so there's also a story about Amnesty International stepping up the condemnation of the fight. Its researchers uncovered worsening repression in the days before the bout. So you can help the country of Saudi Arabia by watching that fight, or you can turn away in disgust at exactly what's happening. Just very quickly, Jim White's column on the back here, not the Sky Jim White, it's the Telegraph's Jim White. Former Manchester United stalwart believes Arsenal's interim manager's casual dress sense shows he's not up for the job. Did you see this?
No.
For one observer, it was not so much his team's haphazard defending, lack of fight, and alarming absence of industry that suggested Freddie Ljungberg might not be ready to step up from interim to permanent manager at Arsenal. It was his clothes.
Who's saying this?
Paul Scholes. Speaking as a pundit on the Premier League's television service, Ljungberg's combination of fisherman's jumper and slacks as he undertook his duties at Carrow Road on Sunday was not only wholly inappropriate, it demonstrated that he was not equipped to take on the job full time. To me, shirt and tie to show some discipline. I don't think he'll be the right man.
Every time Paul Scholes lets himself down like that, I just feel a little bit embarrassed, because us gingers need to stick together and say things that actually make sense. That is a nonsensical thing to say, and I completely disagree with it. Yes. It's just jealous of the beauty of Freddie Ljungberg, which I guess is fair enough, to be fair. Who wouldn't be a little bit jealous? Back page of the Mirror is spurred on. Poch says, I don't need time. I'm open to attractive projects now. Golf fear's new rule, as you've already mentioned, Ger. I'm up for the fight then, meanwhile. Manchester City ace ready for Battle of Skye at Burnley. And we must do better on racism, and we will. That is UEFA President Alexander Seferin. And Merseyside double act. Liverpool will tackle Everton at Anfield twice in a month after last night's FA Cup draw.
The back page of The Guardian, it's Leo Messi again, picking up his sixth Ballon d'Or. And this is, I suppose, official now. Brendan Rodgers, no interest in quitting Leicester for Arsenal. So something has happened in the last 24 hours from the, all contracts have a get-out clause to a, no, the message is clear. It has been, and probably I'll get asked again until they appoint someone. It's very simple. I'm very happy here, he said. So he does not want the gig. It's fair enough, isn't it?
Why would he want it? Why would he leave Leicester City for Arsenal?
Double your salary.
Go at the end of the season, go at the end of the following season, like anywhere. The Arsenal gig is not necessarily the most... It's not like this thing that everybody's been
He's not
sitting
getting
around for, like, kind of tapping the table, looking at this ticking time bomb.
Good gig. Is it? Yeah, great stadium, great tradition, great footballing culture. Like, it's London-based. You can attract any footballer in the world to live in London.
Except for the ones that are actually trying to get out of the club at the moment.
Yeah, but Well, they would, I'm sure, all happily sign for Chelsea or happily sign for Spurs.
Maybe Brendan Rodgers isn't the attractive option that Arsenal need. Like I'm talking about pure rock star persona, fantastic manager, fantastic coach. Will he be the man to keep Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang in the Emirates Stadium? Perhaps not. Maybe Freddie Ljungberg in his casual style is that guy. Imagine if Ljungberg actually put on a suit. How could you say no to that guy? Aubameyang would surely stay at the Emirates Stadium in that situation. Back page of the Herald is C'est la Viva. UEFA experts tell FAI to solve financial woes as Foley refuses to take role. Group to pick Dubs boss await approval. And Rodgers not going to go, as you've already said. Leicester boss not leaving for Arsenal. The Racing Post front page, Altior could be set for step back to 2 miles. And back page is tonight's game on Amazon Prime. Burnley against Manchester City at 8:15. No pain, no gain. Champions face a fight at Turf Moor.
Of course, not on Amazon Prime in Ireland. It's on Premier Sports, right?
Yes.
Do we have an Irish News this morning? No Irish News this morning. We'll get one for you tomorrow. It's 8:06. Football next here on OTB AM. Dan McDonald's going to talk to the FAI, and Sam Lee is going to talk to us about Manchester City. Plenty more coming up on the show this morning. We're going to talk to Ewan MacKenna about his new book, Chaos is a Friend of Mine, The Life and Crimes of Conor McGregor. And we'll continue our search for Irish sport's most memorable moment of the decade. This is OTB AM, the Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball. Right back after these.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station. Off the Ball.
I joke about it now. I can count on the number of times you've actually told me you're proud of me.
Oh, it's the truth. My father, it was only when he was dying in Wexford Hospital 19 years ago, and he said to my cousin was there that he was proud of me. That he never said it.
No, are we blaming? We're not blaming you. But we're blaming Grandad.
Can I officially say I'm proud of him? But I'm proud of my daughter.
Thanks, Dad.
Off the Ball, weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Saturdays. A completely blank canvas for you to do with as you please.
Can you collect my dress from dry cleaners? Sarah and Steve over tonight. Get wine. Also, downstairs bathroom needs attention.
They fill up fast Saturdays. But make sure you fill your boots with Paddy Power's Saturday Power Price, a super enhancement on a specific football treble every Saturday. Paddy Power sponsors the football show on Off the Ball. T's and C's apply. 18 plus on Louis.net.
OTB AM.
All right, you're very welcome back to OTB AM this morning. As ever, if you want to get in touch with us, you can follow us on Twitter at OffTheBallAM, or of course you can just use the hashtag at OTBAM. Now, I'm delighted to say Sam Lee of The Athletic is with us to talk to us a little bit about what's going on at Manchester City. Sam, good morning to you. How you doing?
Good morning. All well, thanks. All well. How are you guys?
I'm good, thanks. Talk to us a little bit about where Pep Guardiola is in the traditional Pep Guardiola cycle. Are we looking at an extended stay at Manchester City, or does this feel like we're on the same kind of timeline as we had at Barcelona and at Bayern Munich?
I wouldn't say extended stay. I know he said the other day he's open to it, but what else are you going to say? You know, when you asked directly in the press conference, you're not going to say, no, I think I'll knock it on the head soon. You know, not doing himself any favours. But, I mean, I can see him seeing out his contract, which is still the end of next season. A lot of people, behind the scenes, a lot of, fans looking from the outside in seem to think he will leave at the end of the season. I can see what they mean. It does look like, the way the question was asked, it does look like he's irritable and getting a bit tired of things and all kinds of other factors. But I think he'll see out his contract. From what I've heard, he's planning for next season. City, I think City are going to give him the squad overhaul that he wanted towards the end of last season to keep things fresh enough for him to carry on.
Sam, we had you on about 12 months ago when I think you were asking Pep about some suggestion that there was a little bit of discontent between himself and Benjamin Mendy, and that there was perhaps signs underneath the surface of a very successful season that all wasn't perfect at Manchester City. Has that worsened as a result of what's gone on in the pitch, since they're not actually doing as well on the pitch as they were this time 12 months ago?
No, it's actually the other way around. It would be much easier to describe City's relative problems. They're relative because they're not mid-table. They're not going to get relegated. They're still going to finish in the top 4, if not the top 2, if not the top 1. They are relative problems. They've just dropped a lot of points behind Liverpool, who obviously haven't dropped points in any game bar one. But no, it would be much easier to understand if there was some kind of Tottenham-esque rumours of Christian Eriksen and Jan Vertonghen and affairs and punching each other in the dressing room and this kind of thing, because the fans could look at it and think, Oh yeah, there's some unrest in the camp, but after the game at the weekend, it was kind of tasked to go and speak to as many people as possible, people close to as many players and the coaching staff as possible. And another colleague went away, and we all came back, and we all found the same thing. Everything behind the scenes in terms of how the players are getting on with each other is fine. There's no big issues like that. There's no friction. It just seems to be a frustration that things have kind of snowballed. The injuries. They're not very happy with VAR, which is a very, kind of them against us kind of mentality, but that's how it is. The same thing with the Bernardo Silva racism tweet, the whole controversy around that, which again is a very them versus us kind of thing. And the results haven't gone well. Everything's kind of snowballed from there. And, there's thinking about the Burnley game tonight, how would they mix it up too much? People want Fernandinho to go back into midfield. That's about it. The only other way you could probably freshen up the lineup is bring in Foden. If you were to make any other changes, there wouldn't be a dramatic impact. The injuries have taken their toll to an extent. They haven't got a lot at the moment, but they have at certain points. There's not a lot they can do within that squad. Obviously, they've spent a lot of money, but the fact remains there isn't a lot they can do within that squad to freshen it up dramatically.
Look, they spent a lot of money, Sam, but there still is a personnel question, and the person that you would have to question is Vincent Kompany. Now, granted, he doesn't come with the sort of... He comes with the aura that you can't necessarily just go out and buy. That comes with time, that comes with experience. But still, there are failings here and there. You mentioned in your piece yesterday in The Athletic that Luka Jovic was a potential opportunity to sign for Manchester City as well, and they couldn't make that acquisition happen. Whereas I was under the impression, say, with the Rodri signing, that there was years and years of preparation gone into a signing like that perhaps they can't actually fail in the transfer window with the amount of money and kind of intelligence they have. So why has this happened? Why have they got into a position where they're kind of looking at a few positions and thinking to themselves, we could have recruited better there?
I'm not entirely sure. I think the problem with the number 9, obviously Luka Jovic was one of them. I think the logic behind it was they wanted close to 100 million for Gabriel Jesus, which was never. I mean, that was never going to happen. Or at least they wanted a big figure, but they also wanted to bring in somebody who's better than Jesus. They couldn't find anybody in the end. They were looking at Ben Chilwell closely, and then until the end of April, it was pretty much on. And then I think they got in contact with him to say, this isn't going ahead anymore, because I think they realised that Benjamin Mendy couldn't be sold. The plan was to get rid of Mendy, but nobody would buy him at that point. Obviously, they wanted Harry Maguire, but then you talk about, in terms of the money they've got and the intelligence. But part of that intelligence, I suppose, is they don't want to be held to ransom. Clubs have always come to them and said, you've got loads of money, we want to sell this guy. What do you reckon? They've wanted to change that. They don't see that as a sustainable way to run a business. And there's all the FFP questions or whatever, but they don't see that as a sustainable way to run a business, getting ripped off for transfers. So if they've got an idea of value, rightly or wrongly, and with Maguire, they wouldn't go to the 80, 85 million. So there's all kinds of different factors. But they wanted a left back, a striker, obviously a centre back. Different reasons didn't happen. Maybe they felt emboldened by the fact they've not had a left back for a couple of years. Delph's done fine, Zinchenko's done fine, and they maybe thought, we can stretch to going in without a new centre back. But obviously, with Laporte going down, that's pretty much a worst case scenario.
Can I ask now, in retrospect, though, do they feel like they dodged a bullet with Harry Maguire? Because Maguire's performances for Manchester United have been adequate. They have not been the dominant centre-back that you would expect for an 85 million. They haven't been Virgil van Dijk level, which is clearly what Manchester City need. Yeah,
the thing is, it's funny because a lot of these players, if not all of them, the players that City want to buy or go close to buying but don't actually get, everyone turns out to be a bullet dodged. Now, is that because they've got lucky, or these players not, they're not benefiting from the coaching they would get elsewhere? I know a lot of City fans had reservations about having Harry Maguire in the team. I think even on the Amazon documentary, there was a bit where Guardiola said, when they played Leicester, getting behind Maguire because, he's not fast.
Yeah.
But I just think if he'd have signed for City, I think he would have been part of a system. And look, the system hasn't always worked this season. But if he were to come in instead of Laporte, they wouldn't have had to move around things. And I think Fernandinho could have probably stayed in midfield. That would have helped solidify things a bit more. I don't think it's a bullet dodge. I think if he would have come into a City team that knows exactly what it's doing, could play to his strengths, maybe mask his weaknesses a bit, I think it'd be a lot better. The problem is you've got a whole can of worms then when you go and talk about United. Fred's looked bad as well. Obviously, Alexis Sanchez, Sanchez might have had a short shelf life, but I think if it had gone to City and it had been, put into a system that's working for him, I think these players would have looked a lot better. It was the same kind of thing with Jorginho last year. Now with Lampard, even though Sarri was there before, but now with Lampard and everyone else is starting to kick on a bit more, we're seeing how good a player Jorginho is. So I think it's a coaching thing, to be honest. I think if he had signed for City, he'd have done well. I've seen signs in Maguire, the way he brings the ball out of defence. It's been quite rare at United, but maybe that's just not what they want. I think at City, it would have suited him much better.
Yeah.
He probably should have known that, to be fair.
Yeah, okay. Let's talk a little bit about the managerial situation. And the backroom team has obviously come in for a bit of speculation just recently with the Arsenal job coming up again. Mikel Arteta had, as far as I know, basically shaken hands on getting the Arsenal job, was certainly on the verge of getting it. The phones stopped ringing over the course of the weekend, and next thing, Unai Emery is parachuted in and gets that gig. So is Arteta likely to go back to a club that has so publicly rejected him as recently as they have, or is he going to sit there at Manchester City and stay and see that Guardiola has a time frame and that clock is ticking?
Yeah, well, that's the big question, I think, because regardless, because I think he was affected by not getting that job. No, how couldn't you be not getting the Arsenal job? But the other side of it is, I still think the Arsenal job's quite good. I think they've got an attractive squad there. I think it's probably better, for argument's sake, than going into Manchester United. I still think Arsenal would be an attractive job. I think they could still finish a good season with the right manager. But the question is, does he stick around for 6 months, maybe 18 months, probably 18 months, and wait for Guardiola? Because I think the goal from City is to hire from within. If you're hiring from within, there's only going to be one candidate. I know Giovanni Van Bronckhorst is around, but I don't know. I think Arteta would be. He's the one that's been on the ground coaching around City for longer. That's more of an internal appointment. I think that would appeal to him more. I'm not sure what the latest is, but as of Friday, people around him were saying he hadn't had an approach. Arsenal hadn't approached City, and Arteta hadn't said anything about it. I think you would imagine there'd be some kind of conversation, but they've got so many names on this list, and my colleague David Ornstein was saying they want people who are out of work. Nobody they have to pay a kind of severance package to. They want to kind of do it on the cheap. So yeah, I know what you mean. The original question, he's got rejected. I don't think he'll go. Basically, I don't think he'll go. Whatever the reasons are, I don't think he'll leave.
And what was your that's obviously changed. So Sam, it was a situation where, as Ger mentioned, he was all set to go. Is it a situation now where he's more ingrained with Pep Guardiola ever since, since Emery has been appointed Arsenal manager and subsequently sacked? There has been more positive sounds about Mikel Arteta coming out from Pep Guardiola himself, that we are seeing the grooming of Pep Guardiola 2.0 almost at Manchester City. Yeah,
again, I'm not sure if he's kind of, I love Pep even more, I'm going to stay. I think he is loyal to Pep. That's what's been put to me. I wrote a piece about Arteta after the Everton game in September. He's loyal to Pep. I think he could have gone to Newcastle in the summer. I think he gave a lot of thought to going to Newcastle. He is very keen to go and be a manager. And obviously, like I said, the Arsenal job is an attractive proposition. I just think the biggest factor now is when he was talking to Arsenal before, Guardiola had just won the first title. He just signed a new contract. I doubt Arteta would have been thinking, I can replace this guy. Now we're another 18 months down the line, and already people are saying, is Pep going to leave? Basically, he's got the 18 months, which is a long time in football, but it's effectively just another season. If he focuses on finishing this season and gets through the next, if you break it down like that, he's thinking, I could probably get this job. And I think that's if he doesn't go to Arsenal, I think that'll be the biggest factor. The fact that now him getting the City job is in view, whereas 18 months ago, I think that was off the table. You
mentioned Van Bronckhorst. What's his role in all this, and where did he become a character within the City hierarchy?
Well, Van Bronckhorst a few months ago, he started being around the club. The thing is, City's got quite a unique structure, where they own other clubs, and there's the whole business side of it, and there's a coaching structure that, to an extent, works across the different clubs. There's consultations. The last couple of weeks, the staff, a load of staff from Torquay, the Uruguayan club, they've been at the Etihad. So they try and share knowledge in that way. And I think the way it's been described is Van Bronckhorst wanted to come in and see how that all works, get some experience coaching. Initially, he didn't have an awful lot to do with the City first team. He's been around a lot, but he's also been to Melbourne. He was at New York towards the end of the MLS season. The playoff starting. He was around then. There was I think there was some idea that he was going to go to New York. I think that seems to have fizzled out. Go to New York as coach. That seems to have fizzled out. And you wonder maybe he wouldn't go now, because if Guardiola were to leave at the end of the season, then you can't bring back the replacement from New York within just as the season's starting. But yeah, he's there getting coaching experience. But now he's back in Manchester. He's a bit more involved in it, and just the idea from hiring from within. They might as well admit they're going to appoint Arteta. It's just interesting that this guy who's had success in his own coaching career is now part of the City Football Group to some extent. Maybe he would be a candidate, and maybe they would still want some interview process, but they want someone they're familiar with, which probably goes back all the way to getting Patrick Vieira in a few years ago. Yeah. I can't imagine he's going to be a candidate, but someone they're familiar with, and he is now one of those.
They're almost building a little empire of coaches in the Manchester City group, and it is interesting as well, kind of on a point that's not really connected to this, but just seeing the huge investment in the City group coming out last week. And you mentioned the CAS investigation as well into Manchester City over financial fair play rules. I think the last we've seen of that story is perhaps maybe just under a month ago at this point, where their appeal for Manchester City was thrown out, and we expect a hearing on that in some time. Is there concerns at Manchester City at the Etihad about how this might go?
No, I actually did the story. It was the day before. It was the day before the CAS hearing came out. But the thing with CAS rejecting City's case then was City said, well, hold on, the UEFA adjudicatory committee, or the investigative committee, are not fit to recommend this punishment to us. They wanted to get it thrown out as soon as possible. But our story was, speaking to sources within City, speaking to sources within UEFA, it looks like City aren't going to get a ban from the Champions League. They're certainly not worried about it. I mean, one possibility is they would get a ban, but then they would appeal, and UEFA would kind of softball the appeal. City would then win the appeal. Everyone would look happy then, because UEFA could say, well, we tried, it came down to the court, and City could be like, well, we've got justice and all this. But yeah, certainly the feeling, which it has been around the club the whole time, to be fair, but I was never sure whether that was defiance or not. But the feeling now is they are going to not get a Champions League ban. So no, I wouldn't say they were particularly worried about it at all. There should be a final decision this month.
So last question then, what has gone wrong on the pitch recently?
Okay, so as far as we know, there's no big bust-up, which there normally is with these kind of things. I think it's just, unfortunately, for media purposes, it's quite a boring list of normal footballing reasons. The injuries they had, particularly at the start, when Laporte got injured, because then De Bruyne got injured straight away as well. Sane was injured, and it just looked like it was spiralling a bit. But then, so there's been that. Like I said, they can't refresh the squad, so the players are a bit tired. They're not quite in form. Bernardo Silva was given a long holiday from the end of last season because obviously he did so much for City and for Portugal. Came back not out of shape, but maybe a bit out of shape. Not quite ready to go at his peak. Then the tweet thing kicked over, so he's had a poor season. De Bruyne, Jesus, and Walker, who have been named by people around as people who haven't, they haven't quite reached their best level. They're kind of inconsistent, which, especially in De Bruyne's case, you don't need that. So they're playing against deep defences. They're trying to break them down, but they've got injuries taking its toll on the squad. The players who are playing every week. Sterling, De Bruyne, maybe a bit tired. Maybe last season's catching up with them to some extent. There's just not quite the energy there. That's all snowballed with the results into a kind of frustration around the squad. The mood's not great. Apparently, the Bernardo Silva tweet situation has affected the dressing room as well. And it's just a little combination of factors which doesn't add up to an awful lot, because, like I say, they're probably still going to finish in the top 2 or 3, if not come back and win the league when everyone's fit. But because Liverpool's level is quite so high, City just aren't quite there, and there's a small lowering of standards, basically. But also, like you mentioned, Kompany's left. Fabian Delph was a big leader. He would keep people on their toes. Not necessarily a great leader on the pitch, but Kompany never played that often. But it's just being around, keeping people on their toes. Those two have gone. De Bruyne and Walker have been trying to rally the troops instead, not quite to the same effect, and just a load of little things like that have just contributed to a little problem which could potentially be quite costly, because it looks like they're not going to win the league.
Sam, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning.
Thanks, guys.
Sam Lee from The Athletic there, giving us some thoughts on the situation at Manchester City. Let's move on and talk about the FAI, because in the newspapers this morning there is a suggestion coming from UEFA that one possible way out in the short term for the FAI from the financial quagmire they find themselves in would be to sell their share of the Aviva. Dan McDonald had this story in the Irish Independent this morning. Dan, good morning to you.
Morning, Ger.
There's only one potential buyer, is there? Or is this the type of thing that you could sell to an IMG or one of those companies who then would try and maximise their revenue from it?
Yeah, now you would think there would only be one real potential buyer. I can't imagine how the other scenarios would play itself out. I mean, I guess this is a view that does exist, amongst certain people in UEFA who are obviously briefed and aware of the FAI figures. I mean, they obviously are probably looking at things in a cold and unemotional way, and they just look at a financial situation and they look at what your assets might be, and they think that this is something that should be considered, whether it really flies or could be contemplated by the FAI. I mean, I think they're aware of it, but I mean, that's another matter. But I suppose it exposes how serious the financial situation must be, that something like this, that there's an external view that this should be countenanced. But to go back to your original point, I mean, just with the whole situation of the stadium, the fact that it's a lease, that it's going back to the IRFU eventually, some way into the future, it will be the IRFU aspect that you will be looking at that if this was to be explored in any way.
How is this proposal actually delivered to the FAI? What stage of conversations are we at where an organisation who you owe a lot of money to comes in, looks at your books and goes, you need to flip this?
Well, I mean, I suppose it's known and it's been written that UEFA have been, I suppose, holding the FAI's hand throughout this entire, this entire process. I mean, going as far back as the summer, they've been going through the books. They've been engaged in terms of a review, in terms of a business plan. I think it's been, reported in our paper today that there's 15 million of advance funds being laid aside to get the FAI through the initial crisis. But the initial crisis is just that. I mean, if you're drawing down funds, from monies that are owed to you in the coming years, then naturally when the coming years come around, then you have to maybe look to draw down from the future years, unless you've somehow managed to looked at something dramatic to address your sort of cash flow position and to give you some kind of certainty. And this is why, I mean, options and suggestions are raised, that they're floated. It may not be a case that they put things on paper and say this is a firm proposal. This is just discussion, but this is a view that is held in certain quarters. And again, my impression on it would be that I'm not sure that this is something that the FAI are going to look at other options. They're going to look at every option right now. But I mean, we don't have any evidence from looking and reporting and studying the FAI picture that that the figures presented later this week are going to be good. They're going to reveal a substantial debt, and there is no easy way to cure that debt position unless there's suddenly going to happen upon substantial amounts of money. And I'm sure you can qualify for tournaments again and again, but that can only generate so much either, because tournament revenues can be chipped away at. So you have to look at your options, and this is one that an outsider thinks should be looked at.
What would the feeling within the FAI be, just even kind of by your own guesswork, if they were to get back into a situation where they had to rent the Aviva Stadium or Lansdowne Road as it used to be from the IRFU? I presume this is not something that is very palatable to the FAI at the moment. No, and I can't imagine. It's. I suppose the only thing you have to say is who is the FAI at the moment. I mean, the FAI are having, are facing a sort of a massive leadership issue, has been well reported yesterday. John Foley has stepped aside. We know that perhaps the people that are driving decision making in the FAI now may not be there in 12 months' time. I mean, there's 4 new independent directors due to come in, an independent chair is due to come in. Some new board members have come in, but others will be replaced next June. So, the hierarchy of the FAI, there's going to be a new chief executive appointed at some shape, some way down the road.
So, I mean, 12 months' time, you're going to have probably a different FAI leadership today. What doesn't change, I guess, is the FAI membership. I mean, there is moves to change and sort of reshuffle and sort of refresh some of the bodies that sit on council. But, I mean, there are people up and down the country who, over a long period of time, have been engaged in the, I guess, process of trying to sell tickets for the Aviva for taking some pain because the cost of delivering the stadium was worth it. So you would think it would be pretty unpalatable to suddenly have to contemplate acknowledging that was almost, I don't know if waste of time is the right phrase, but I mean, it would be quite a retrograde step. So I think that's why it would be a pretty hard one to push through. But the broader point is that if the opinion exists that it should be considered, this is why. Well, then you have to look at serious alternatives as well, and that in every scenario you look at here, there's going to have to be some pain encountered, and it's a case of where you can take it.
Like, what about the eventual route of disbanding the FAI and starting from scratch? It's something that Eamon Dunphy is floating in the Star this morning. It's radical, but we've seen it happen in other Irish institutions before. Is this something that perhaps people within the FAI are thinking this could be the way forward?
Yeah, I mean, that was floated, I guess, maybe not in explicit terms, but I think actually Niall Quinn mentioned that at a point in the road, and could you suddenly end up with a Football Ireland or a version of same? I think you would probably face problems with UEFA and FIFA in that regard. I don't. Now, I mean, ironically enough, within the FAI, it's quite usual for League of Ireland clubs to suddenly reset and appear with a new trading company as though nothing had happened, really. But I would imagine that is the sort of a particularly nuclear option. And I think, when a certain amount, again, of funds and deals have been committed to, it will be hard to do. I mean, there'll be complexities, there'll be complications. I mean, then everything is up for grabs in terms of your stadium and on your assets and everything you own. I mean, we know that, there's, again, advanced funds are going to be drawn down from TV deals going some way into the future and other arrangements going some way into the future. So how you would sort of handle the mechanisms of looking at that, I would say it would be too complicated. But it's a sort of, we are in a situation now where to suggest nothing seems too outlandish, in terms of a discussion point. I mean, stuff that it would have seemed completely far-fetched to even discuss it. I think now things have reached this sort of point in the road where all options have to be considered. I can't see it, but at the same time, I can't really scoff at someone for suggesting it either.
Very difficult to get good value for something when the person who is the only buyer knows that you have to sell and knows that you're desperate for cash. So it's not like the IRFU are just going to gift the FAI the full market value of something like this. So I don't know how you would actually go about negotiating, and who knows if the IRFU actually need to hand over the cash when they're like, well, we're going to get this back anyway in 50 years. Why would we bother spending money on it now?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's always been one of the curious aspects of the stadium deal, of course, is that if you look at the stadium accounts on a yearly basis, the IRFU and the FAI are they're in a 50-50 ownership deal, but the stadium company still pays a rent figure every year to the IRFU because they ultimately own the land. And one of the big boasts, I guess, of the previous FAI regime would have been, the stadium had been delivered. But of course, when there's another generation coming down the road, are going to see the stadium handed back to the IRFU. Now, the view always was that, I mean, the sort of lease arrangement, well, that's based in tandem with the sort of natural shelf life of the stadium, and that when the 60-year lease approached its end, well, it's very likely that the stadium would be dated at that stage, and a new deal will be explored. But it is still a fact at the moment that ultimately, that the FAI's ownership is a lease. It's not a firm ownership of the land that's there in a prime location. So the IRFU have always had the better end of the deal. And I mean, again, what would they see the value to be of doing so? I mean, well, I guess in terms of ongoing fees and so on, they'd be in a strong position. But yeah, it's a fair point. I mean, people who are looking at this from the outside aren't briefed on the IRFU position as such. They're just looking at it from a purely FAI perspective. What have you got? What can you do? What can you generate revenue from? What can you generate cash from that might, ease off this sort of never-ending cash flow fear that you might face over the next coming years, and things change dramatically, and that's where recommendations come from. Whether they're ever acted upon is another thing.
Yeah, I would say that the plan at the start was for the FAI to flog all these premium tickets and then be sitting on a load of cash over the next couple of decades and then build a brand spanking new stadium, all for the FAI at some point within the next 60 years. But I think that's very wishful thinking at this point.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, with everything that's happened with the FAI and the FAI crisis now, I mean, we go back 9 months, but really this all goes back, 10 years when, the FAI had the chance to get things right as regards pricing for the new stadium, and they made decisions that they didn't roll back on quickly enough. And that created pressures that they've almost been just sort of kicking that can down the road a small bit, and eventually it's caught up with them in a fairly dramatic and, I suppose, traumatic way.
Dan, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning.
Thanks, guys. Dan
McDonald giving us his thoughts there. You can read all about that in this morning's Irish Independent. Now, voting is live on twitter.com/offtheball and also on our Instagram stories. The winner will be announced tonight at 9 o'clock. It is the round of 16. It's Clash 2. It's the Rio Derby. It's Pat Hickey's arrest in Brazil versus the O'Donovan's big breakthrough and their silver medal in the Olympic Games in Rio. The winner will be announced between 8:30 and 9 o'clock tonight on Off the Ball on News Talk. Now, Tom Malone's in the studio next with the sports news. First, we had Wolves and Sheffield United's 1-1 draw live and Off the Ball this weekend. David Myler joined Stephen Doyle in the commentary box. Here's David talking about our hopes of playing some tournament football next summer.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Off the ball. Oh, wow. This is aggressive. I'm watching Off the Ball. I'm Scottish. I'm on YouTube.
I met a South African last night and he was there. He knew that Dublin won 5 in a row because he watched us Off the Ball. He really, and he lives in Thailand.
I've watched Off the Ball on YouTube. They're good boys. We love you, we love you, and everywhere we follow, we follow, we follow. We absolutely love it.
Off the Ball. This is OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Right, apologies for that. No audio on that video here, but in the meantime, Tom Malone is here. Tom, how are you?
Good, yeah. So this is going to start with where Dan left off, where you just reminded about that story. The FAI understood to be coming under increased pressure from UEFA to examine if they can sell off part or all of their share in the Aviva Stadium to address their debt crisis. UEFA reportedly already advanced the FAI €15 million to solve its cash flow issues, which include paying off debts on the stadium. Overall debt believed to be in the tens of millions. Of course, we won't hear more on that fully until that report comes out, but yeah. Obviously not great news for
We're all going to unfortunately get very familiar with FAI finances.
And the amount of just administrators we have to cover these days.
It's like, just want to talk about X's and O's.
It should become like a junior cert subject.
Yeah, sports administrators.
A case study in business or something. Probably too complicated for leaving cert, actually. It'd be more like a PhD subject, the finances of the FAI. Good idea, actually.
There you go. You can give your life some meaning and direction. If you want.
They're crying out for it.
Yeah. Let's move on to actual football and upcoming in the FA Cup. The draw was made last night for the third round, so there will be a Merseyside derby in the third round of this season's FA Cup after Liverpool and Everton were drawn together last night. Non-league side Fylde will travel to Premier League club Sheffield United, while current holders Manchester City will host Port Vale of League 2. Elsewhere, Arsenal were drawn against Leeds, who are now second in the Championship. Chelsea will entertain Nottingham Forest, and Manchester United have a trip to Wolves to look forward to. At the Ballon d'Or last night, Leo Messi picked up the gong for the 6th time as he won the Ballon d'Or trophy. Liverpool defender Virgil van Dijk was second, with Cristiano Ronaldo in third, while American Megan Rapinoe won the Women's Award and in her acceptance speech called for more action against racism and homophobia.
I feel like if we really want to have meaningful change, what I think is most inspiring would be if everybody other than Raheem Sterling and Koulibaly, if they were as outraged about racism as they were. If everybody else was that. If everybody was as outraged about homophobia as the LGBTQ players. If everybody was as outraged about equal pay or the lack thereof or the lack of investment in the women's game other than just women, that would be the most inspiring thing to me. So I feel like that's my ask of everybody.
Yeah, those are the thoughts of Megan Rapinoe there. Controversial late penalty, meanwhile, in the Championship last night by Charlie Austin sent West Brom back to the top of the Championship. It did look like Kyle Edwards had at best minimal contact with Declan Rudd in the closing stages there. But anyway, they beat Preston by 1-0 at Deepdale, and that puts West Brom 2 points clear of Leeds at the top. And despite that defeat, Preston still in the playoff positions there in 6th place. The 2 Premier League games this evening. Crystal Palace host Bournemouth. Going into that game, the Eagles are 11th, while the visitors just 1 spot below them and 2 points behind as well. Kick-off there at Sellers Park at 7:30. While Manchester City will look to get back to winning ways as they go to Burnley. Going into this game, City are 3rd in the table, 11 points off leaders Liverpool, and they'll go level on points. And if they win by more than 1 goal, they will go ahead of Leicester into 2nd place. Manager Pep Guardiola, though, says it's all they can think about is this one game.
You have to believe and win tomorrow. That is the fact. You know, the situation that we are, we cannot think too much about the people that are in front. So I think we have to think about what we have to do to win the games.
And that game kicks off at 8:15.
8:15.
Oh, I know. Well, nightmare for us especially.
An 8:15 kickoff.
Well, it's because of the 7:30 kickoff in the other game, so you can get 45 minutes of that, click close, go on to another illegal stream, and then start the other one.
Hey, excuse me.
Sorry, did I say that word?
We do not endorse that sort of behaviour.
No, it's...
You're going to be watching it on Premier Sports tonight.
Premier Sports.
Well, I was kind of more talking about, speaking on behalf of my United Kingdom brethren, saying that, of course, if they don't have a laptop or if they don't have access to Amazon Prime as well.
Amazon Prime subscription.
We're lucky that we can get it all on our actual television. But the internet is just too futuristic for us.
Or smart TV. Mauricio Pochettino has signalled he is willing to return to frontline management. The Argentine was speaking on Argentinian TV after being let go by Tottenham last month. Meanwhile, in more Spurs news, Christian Eriksen is understood to be willing to leave Spurs and not sign a new contract. While in rugby, some good news on the Joey Carberry injury front. He says he's in line to return for Munster against Leinster in the Pro 14 at the end of the month. Fly, of course, been struggling with that ankle injury since before the World Cup.
Just in time for the Six Nations. That's good. He'll have plenty of time to get fit for that. What do you do with Eriksen? He wants out.
Yeah.
He's not going to convince him to stay.
Well, Jose Mourinho, this
have to sell and cash in, don't you?
Yeah, this is something that I think Jose is actually on the record of saying as a pundit.
Yeah.
That.
And he said it when I think he said it very quickly when he got there as well. The alternative is that you have a player who plays really well and you might scrape into the Champions League. Because you're not going to get somebody in the transfer window who's as good as Christian Eriksen, are you?
No, and he was pretty good as well. He kind of grew into the game in midweek last week in the Champions League, and obviously has the sublime ability. And it benefits both sides of the party here for Christian Eriksen to come back and play really good football.
Yeah, well then he's like, actually Real Madrid might want to purchase me now the way I'm playing now as opposed to the way I've been playing for the last year.
Yeah, so a lot of the American hacks who are getting into soccer, who cover American sports, are like, I don't really understand how European footballers don't understand the whole notion of a contract year. Where you play amazingly well, you're best up for one season.
And then they down tools.
Exactly, they do the opposite. They down tools and diminish their value. It's the most idiotic thing. It's like, I'm going to, not put any good tape out there, make everybody think I'm a bit of an asshole, as opposed to going in, doing your best, playing unbelievably well, muscling your way to take the penalties to make sure that your stats are off the charts, and then getting the fat contract and then downing tools.
It's true. I don't understand why that doesn't happen. Like there's a lot of sulking that goes on in and amongst footballers, and there's no real.
There's no logic to it. Yeah, there's absolutely zero logic.
So just put yourself in Christian Eriksen's shoes for a moment, and you're saying to yourself, right, I want to get this move to Real Madrid.
Or anybody who's going to pay me twice what I'm getting, 3 times what I'm getting paid now. How am I going to do that?
Does he really? Maybe he thinks that his value as a footballer is still so high that no matter what he does, he can't actually damage it. And maybe he'll just feel this little pang of guilt if Tottenham do come up with a fat contract at the end of the season.
No, that's not how it works.
Yeah, I remember Brendan Rodgers talking about this. He said, like, footballers need to think about it. I think it's like the 54 or something like that. Like, they'll have basically 54 good months where they can make as much money as possible, absolute maximum. And they need to think about that. And he said the amount of players that don't. And, you know...
Brendan Rodgers said that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Brendan Rodgers a couple of years ago. He's like, well, those are, you know, those sort of 4 odd years where you can make enough money to not have to work ever again, essentially.
If you're stupid and sign a contract and you get trapped in a long-term deal early on in that cycle, you're wasting all that. You need to enter your 54 months at the start, or you need to finish a contract just before it starts. So that you're getting in, or maybe you need to finish one very early on, maybe after 12 months. Play really well for 12 months and then you've got 4 years of massive contracts. I signed a 2-year deal here, lads, for PSG.
Yeah, or the PSG where it didn't matter. It's like 2 years is fine there.
It is remarkable how the story has totally shifted. Granted, we're not in a transfer market, but it has just become Ericsson feeding information now. During the summer, obviously, it was Manchester United, Real Madrid feeding information. I accept that we're not in a transfer window, but this seems to be something that Christian Eriksen feels that he can deliver on, which is him getting more money.
If you are Spurs and the 50 million is coming from somebody who is your rival for 4th, do you take the money?
In January?
Yeah, Man United.
I don't think so. I think you're essentially giving up a fantastic asset that you know is a fantastic asset.
Yeah, because it's not even essentially about that 4th place. It's like in the next 2 years, you're going to be... The 3 years, he's just going to be, you know, raining on your parade.
The last big move between top clubs is potentially Alexis Sanchez to Arsenal.
It worked out very well.
Yeah, no.
So they could look at that and say that'll fail. I'm not sure will Christian Eriksen go in a similar manner, but then again, it was very, very hard to see Sanchez going in a similar manner because you looked at him and you were saying to yourself, well, imagine if he played for an even better club. This guy is world class. He's Arsenal's best player by a country mile, and then actually he gets worse by going to what was perceived to be a better club at the time. Christian Eriksen, you would say, is in a similar bracket. Sometimes in his career, you were like, God, if this guy actually got a move to Real Madrid, could he make that kind of Luka Modric leap in profile?
Okay, maybe Luka Modric is a good example, but like he needs to take over games and take over a season and to be at that level, right?
Because that's what I'm saying. It's like the perception is
he's not Eden Hazard good, is he?
No.
No, he's not. So Eden Hazard good is... Well, okay, if you break it down to actually what they've shown on a consistent basis, I think...
Ability to take over games, run games, be the dominant. Dominant.
I would put in terms of what they've shown, Christian Eriksen and Eden Hazard's peaks aren't too far apart. When it comes to talent and an ability to be a game breaker when they're on form, Eden Hazard is obviously ahead. But I don't think Hazard has shown
those athletes have amazing peaks. It's your mean performance over the course of a season.
Mean performance, Christian Eriksen, it will be quite close to Eden Hazard.
Really?
I think so.
Well, just because that's because Hazard's lows when he does.
It's not as far away as you may think. I think in talent, it's no question, and I still believe Hazard is better even over mean performance, but it's not a landslide win for Hazard in that column. Like there's a reason why Real Madrid went out and ensured they got Hazard. If Real Madrid really wanted Christian Eriksen,
they would have had him.
Yeah, they would have had him.
Because I don't think they were. Spurs were. Obviously, Spurs are always trying to screw teams, but I don't think they were trying to screw them that much in the summer. And they knew that they wanted to get rid of him, and he wanted to go, and it was the perfect scenario. Yeah. And maybe they would have had to fire Pochettino at that point. Right at 8:48 this morning on OTB AM, it's time for this.
The known for being cheats. I'll always be cheats. Amateur boxing stinks from the core right to the top.
It's Clash 2. We're bringing you the Rio Derby. It's Pat Hickey's arrest versus Gary and Paul O'Donovan's breakthrough. We're going to bring you the contenders and bring in a special guest who spent the summer of 2016 in Rio covering a dramatic Olympic Games. The poll has been live since 8:30, where you, the public, and loyal off-the-ball listeners will decide who wins.
Gary and Paul O'Donovan from Skibbereen, Olympic silver medalists. How does it feel?
It's fantastic. We haven't had too much of a chance yet to come to terms with it. We're a little bit disappointed we didn't come away with the gold medal. I think we put it up to the French as best we could, and we died close there at the end. I'd say we were going all over the lane, but we're dreading going home now because Mick Condon said he boxed the head off us if we didn't get the gold. So.
Feeling when they crossed the line?
That was hard, hard work. We're bad out at that stage. I didn't know what was after happening. I didn't know if we won a medal or not, and I saw it on the big screen. Then we were second, and he informed me then of that. So It was all ghosts and sent like a circus.
Have you spoken to your nanny yet?
No, we haven't spoken to anyone.
Let's get on the phone to her now in a minute, but we heard there's no brown cake being made today with the excitement.
No brown cake, but plenty of circus going on in Rio as well. Here's Pat Hickey.
We still have hours to go in Rio, where Pat Hickey is currently under guard in hospital, awaiting questioning on 3 serious charges which carry sentences of 7 years.
Facing charges on the basis of ticket touting, forming a cartel and illicit marketing. So this is Europe's top Olympic official. This is not just somebody from one of the 206 countries. This is a member of the IOC Executive Board. He's been the Olympic Council of Ireland president since the late 1980s. So this is a very big figure, not just in Irish sport, but in global sport.
Yeah, so a dramatic Olympic Games. John Duggan?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Rio?
Yeah, Ger and Eoin, yeah.
You were a man in Rio?
I was, yeah. And it was Vietnam is what I call Rio. It was Vietnam.
Did you get flashbacks?
Yeah, it was the Monday Katie Taylor lost. The Tuesday, Michael Conor went mad, justifiably so, and then Annalise Murphy an hour and a half later. It takes about an hour and a half to get anywhere in Rio. It's like going from Michael Conor, think about Michael Conor. If you think of Dublin, Michael Conor was fighting in Bray. You've got to get on a bus then to go to a hub, say in Sandyford, to get another bus to go out to Santry for Annalise Murphy, won her silver medal. And then I was just going on at 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. every morning, and I just said to Ian Dempsey, the presenter at the time, we live in a crazy world, Ian, I'm going to bed now. There's about only 3 Irish athletes involved. Got a call from Sinead Spain, the news editor, woke me up at 8 a.m. Brazil time to say, Pat Hickey's been arrested, you're on the news in an hour. And, you know, I don't know if anybody's seen Apocalypse Now, where they've got those kind of fans.
Yeah.
And I felt it was like the helicopters. And there was no whiskey bottle or anything like that, or vodka bottle, but I felt like...
Broken mirror, isn't it?
Yeah. Martin Sheen punches the mirror. And that's exactly how I felt. I was like, I cannot believe this is happening. I'm so thrilled to be out here. But how are we going to do this? We managed to get it done, but it was an absolute earthquake. It was an earthquake. Like we did a failed drugs test at the start of the games.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, and that in itself would have been mad enough. But then to have Katie failing, and it's great to see her come back now and be a world champion. But I remember just seeing her in absolute devastation in what I would just describe as some kind of an industrial estate, where the boxing was half full. Then the next day, Michael Conor going mad, and you could see him going mad on the cameras just right in front of you, and then Annalise Murphy winning, and then Pat Hickey getting arrested. Like, it's just...
What is it about Irish sporting events and industrial estates that just spell complete and utter disaster? It's like 2007 Rugby World Cup, the Irish Team Hotel.
The putting of his, boarding his plane ticket and putting his passport up on for a press conference that people could photograph, that was just crazy stuff. And you're thinking, and then it all just then came out, didn't it? All the stories about... It's funny, I bought my ticket for the opening ceremony on the day of the opening ceremony, because my accreditation couldn't let me get into the opening ceremony. I spent €410 on my ticket for the opening ceremony. These are the tickets that were, exchanging for bigger prices. And it wasn't even fully... That was full, but not all of the events were full in Rio.
The polls have been live for about 20 minutes or so. Give us a guess at where they are.
O'Donovan's are going to win this. O'Donovan's... The O'Donovan brothers in Rio 2016 is just the definition of a memorable moment. It was this wave we'd all been carried on for a couple of days in a sport that most people didn't know a lot about when it came to the personalities.
They look so young.
They're very... you think they're big lads, but they're very, very kind of light. Well, obviously they're now.
That's the point. They're kind of like the jockeys of the water, really, aren't they?
Yeah, but they didn't look that way. I thought these are guys who are really, really toned and like muscly and whatever, and they're not like that at all. It was a bit like there was a story about ABBA the movie where the guy was trying to get ABBA for I don't know how long, and he eventually just met them in the lift. And it was a bit like that with the lack of access that we scrambled O'Donovans when they were walking into the village. The thing with the O'Donovans is that if they hadn't qualified, we'd never have known the characters that they would have become and what they would have done, and how much they kind of, with was it pull like a dog and the stake and the spuds and all that kind of stuff. And how many other people are out there in minority sports that are great characters and potentially could be stars, but if they just don't qualify, if we just don't know about them, then we're never going to know them. I think that's one of the real positives about the O'Donovans. The Hickey thing, though, for people considering voting for the Hickey story has changed Irish sporting governance. Would we have an FAI situation without the Hickey story? The way it was broken and the clamour and the demands for... Because Pat Hickey had been involved in Irish sports governance for what, over 2 decades?
More long,
yeah, 1989, and was very high up, and you remember the photos of him and Putin and that. Would we have the clamour now for change in the FAI? Would we have the clamour for change in county boards and in certain parts of the GA world where we see, in other words, a lack of corporate governance or a lack of hygiene around sports administration if the Pat Hickey thing hadn't happened?
No, you wouldn't have Peter Sherrod and Sarah Keane in charge at the Olympic Federation, and that's been great for our sport to have, those characters in charge and running things.
It was seismic. It was a huge event. Like, Romario getting involved in Brazil.
Mario, I forgot about that.
But this whole THG ticket issue was an issue at the World Cup. I was in the World Cup and I went out there for a week personally in 2014. That was an issue that the FIFA and Brazilian authorities had said if this happens again, there's going to be a problem. And then it became a problem because touting. I remember being at the World Cup final in 2014, couldn't get in, and all the touts were being arrested outside the stadium. So touting was a problem in Brazil, or was seen as a problem by the authorities.
They tried to step in and fix it
before the Olympics, and then when there was allegations of touting in Rio Olympics, but I don't think anybody could have expected Pat Hickey to be arrested in his bathrobe at the Windsor Hotel. Like, there's a photo, I just looked back this morning, there's a photo of Shane Ross, Pat Hickey and Annalise Murphy on the Tuesday, all smiling with the silver medal, and the next day he is arrested. It is an international story, and I still think it's one of the biggest stories we've had. For me, if I was voting, I'd be voting for the Pat Hickey story.
Would you, yeah?
Yeah. And the other ones are great and everything, but the Pat Hickey story was a game changer for Irish sports administration, how things are run, and the kind of the bar that should be set, as it should be set in any country for the way we administer sport,
Yeah. Okay, so you think that's got a chance of winning, and it has your vote?
It has my vote.
That's an important tick, I think, beside the Pat Hickey thing. That'll probably sway a few people who are actually deciding whether or not to vote for that. I think the O'Donovans are an unstoppable force in perhaps this entire tournament, because it's the longevity of the moment. This is a moment that kind of is not just the sporting event. It is the post-race interviews, the multiple post-race interviews. It is Graham Norton. It is everything.
Yeah, the O'Donovans did bless us with one of the greatest radio interviews of the decade. Joe, Adrian and Richie were due to chat to Mark O'Donovan back in May 2017 when the interview got hijacked.
This is Paul now. I'm just going to add in there that Mark and Sheahan actually lived in the same bedroom above a pub for a couple of months before, how long were you in the pub together that time?
Too long.
They were never out of each other's hair, so they're practically the same person there,
It's a shame every Saturday night there would be music on in the pub below, so we'd never really get to sleep too early. It'd be about 3 o'clock, and we'd have to be up early Sunday morning for training. So
this is Paul again. It's a wonder how you didn't go down.
That's definitely Gary, by the way. There's no chance. You could get away with that once, Gary, not twice.
Piratical behaviour was great. It was a real breath of fresh air, and it was kind of very important for the sport that they came to the front as well.
And for the Olympics and for the Irish support of the Olympics and feeling that we actually have people out there that actually achieving, because the boxers did not achieve in Rio at all, and they were expected to achieve. So that we had the O'Donovans, Annalise Murphy was a really kind of a saver.
What do you reckon the spread is at the minute?
O'Donovan's going to win this by like 75-25 or something like that.
Well, Pat Hickey's not a fashionable or a sexy story, but it's a huge story. And to me,
73-27 is the current score.
Right.
So.
To the O'Donovans.
Yeah. Down to 71-29. So.
You can't beat characters, to be fair.
Right. Voting is live until 8:30 tonight, and the winner will be announced on the radio this evening. John, thanks very much.
Right,
we are right back after these.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
From true crime believers to science and business achievers, sports, arts and comedy to the latest entertainment wannabe. Get political, get healthy, get educated. Get all your favourite podcasts on Go Loud. Download the Go Loud app now or add us on your smart speaker. Go Loud. Podcasts, radio and music to your ears.
OTB a.m. on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Plenty for us to get our teeth into from across the show this morning. Christian Eriksen has said that he's up for sale. The Aviva is not up for sale, we don't think, but UEFA are like, here lads, you know, you have something in the back pocket there that maybe might be a good thing, might be a way of us getting our money back. But if you're the IRFU, are you looking at the FAI saying, yeah, we'll bail you out, no problems, we've got loads of money? Is that what they're going to do?
I would like to think that if they were going to buy something, it would be for their own benefit rather than helping their buddies out across Dublin. So, but like the benefits of owning your own stadium fully, I'm sure the IRFU look at the days of when they owned Lansdowne Road fully as good days for them. Like, it's never a bad thing to own your own stadium. It just costs a lot of money to make that happen. And just because the IRFU is not in the perilous state that the FAI is in financially, doesn't mean that they just naturally have money sloshing around to buy half a stadium. So they would need to weigh it up very carefully as to what the benefits are. And there is a finite lease on this thing, I'd imagine, that you are still just buying it for 50 years and what you'd actually get for that, because as we were saying earlier on, the FAI clearly plans to share this for 60 years, and then come the end of the 60 years, it's like, we're out of town, IRFU, you're stuck in your crappy Aviva Stadium, we've got this mega bowl out in the outskirts of Dublin.
There was no mega bowl. That's the worst fantasy you've ever had. There was no, like, they tried to build their own stadium once. And then Bertie Ahern came along and squashed it, and then Bertie's stadium got squashed. Like, there's been a lot of squashing of stadiums. We don't need any more stadiums. We need fewer stadiums.
But I agree. I'm saying that perhaps the FAI thought that they were going to mushroom the Delaney Bowl.
I think that they really thought they were just going to ride this out. Everybody would be dead, and it's another generation's can that has been kicked down the road, and now they have to hold the can and put some petrol in it.
Well, that's the petrol will be gone by 2060, I think. Wasn't it?
Oh, wait, I mean, have you seen Mad Max?
I actually have. That's a good point. So that kind of flies right in the face of my entire argument right there. So first of all, the FAI are not going to do this. This is a story that has come from UEFA suggesting that they do this. The FAI to actually come along and say, we are going to solve all our financial issues right now and sell half the Aviva Stadium, I don't think is going to happen. I think that if there is a decision made on this, it'll take quite some time before it's arrived at. And I also think that the FAI will try everything under the sun to make sure that this is not the decision that they have to follow through with, to sell half of their stadium.
I do have an issue with our top 16 sporting moments of the decade.
Why?
There is no Donegal on the list. There's no Jim McGuinness. There is no... they were the defining force that everybody defined themselves against. They were the ones who Paul Flynn told us in the last decade. They were the ones who Paul Flynn told us that Dublin thought they were saving football. And then that Dublin team who were saving football got beaten by Donegal. Like, in probably the standout game of the decade.
No, that's not true.
Well, it probably is.
It's not the standout game of the decade.
It probably is. It probably is the standout game of the decade.
It's really not, though.
It's the biggest surprise. It's the defending champions being dethroned. It's the only team who beat Dublin in the championship in a meaningful game, apart from Mayo in, was that 2010? What else did they lose?
They lost in 2012 as well.
Who?
Mayo in 2012. 2010 was Cork. Yeah.
Cork. So Cork beat them 10, Mayo beat them 2012. And but Tim Gavin lost one game in the championship, and it's this Donegal team. That Donegal team helped to define the decade in a way that Mayo's rivalry is great. And poor Mayo. We didn't even get into the Mayo story this morning in the papers, which we should do. But that Donegal team absolutely deserved to be in the 16 moments. Either the 6-5 or the 3-all or the 0-all draw, whatever game that was, whatever year that was, 2011
semi-final,
or the All-Ireland semi-final where they shocked the Dubs with like one of the best displays of attacking football, one of the best displays of counter-attack and tactics that we've seen from any team over, in any sport.
They'd won the All-Ireland 2 years before. I don't buy this that it was one of the biggest shocks we've seen.
It was a massive shock.
It was a big shock. But like there were a slew of big shocks that we've seen
throughout the entire
decade.
Big shocks.
So
of a size, of a scale.
We've seen Longford beat Monaghan, for example.
Yeah, no one cares. Right, really, nobody cares. It's not All-Ireland semi-final.
You take that back. Look down the camera and apologise to
Longford beating Monaghan. No one cares the same way they care about Dublin being beaten.
It was a big thing. They'd done one in a row, though.
Yeah, but then they win everything since they won.
It's true.
And they partly win it because of that game. Actually, more than likely, that game is the game that wins the 5 in a row for them.
I don't have that, though. I would have the end of the 5 in a row above that. I would have the 2017 All-Ireland above that. I would have the 2011 All-Ireland above that.
The 2011 All-Ireland, I will have a conversation with you about that. But the other ones, they're on the list.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, just 2011 and 2017. I would have this year's...
GPS is on the list, right?
Yeah, but I would have 2019 ahead of 2014.
GPS is just a free kick. That's all.
It comes at the end of an amazing All-Ireland final, though. It's
with the semi-final where they get beaten, like they're playing some of the best football they've ever played. That first half, Connolly and Paul Flynn are sensational, absolutely like worldy. That game should have been on the list.
No, not for me. Not in the top 16. This is caviar Irish sports moments we're talking about. This is Joe Sheridan throwing the ball over the line, sort of stuff we're talking about.
Yeah, rubbish.
In terms of being truly memorable for years and years and years and years to come. I just don't think it is at that same level. It is memorable.
What?
It is memorable.
It's literally one of the most talked about moments
it is memorable.
ever.
It is memorable.
This is the moment where the Dublin team were born, where they had to go and change we're swashbuckling all out attack.
Most
we're
of them have a couple of All-Irelands before then, in terms of being born.
Well, we're not going to be talking about this again. I can't even tell you which year some of the stuff you're talking about happened. So all the Dublin Mayo games, they're great games, and the rivalry's not really a rivalry, obviously, because Dublin always win, but it helps to build a picture of how good the Dublin team are. But this is there's a hinge point here for the entire decade. And it's a brilliant game. The sun is shining. It's beautiful. It's perfect.
I just don't, but we're talking about this getting into the top 16 here.
Yeah.
Like we've seen...
It should be in the top 3 or 4.
We've seen Katie Taylor and Robbie Brady's faces up there. Like, does Ryan McHugh and that 2014 final belong in that?
Does Robbie Brady a goal against a second already qualified string?
Here we go.
For Italy.
Has the lost ball. It is a goal! Robbie Brady!
He used the word. We should play that sting every time Ger says second string or anybody says second string over the next few weeks, because it's the easy argument to make against Robbie. Are you telling me that that's a bigger moment than Robbie Brady?
I think for the history of Gaelic football, it's a massive moment, yeah.
Bigger than Robbie Brady as a memorable sports moment this decade?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah. I was at both of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that the one that has the most lasting impact is absolutely the goal of the game between Dublin and Donegal.
We're not ranking Ireland's most lasting impact moments here.
Well, so
we're ranking Ireland's most memorable sports moments here.
Yeah,
Robbie Brady is far more memorable.
In 100 years'
than
time,
the 2014
where did
All-Ireland
the 5 in a
semi-final.
row come from? Where did the 5 in a row come from, Dad?
It came from the 2015 All-Ireland final when they won the first of the 1 in a row.
Well, do you know what happened?
5 in a row.
Dublin realised that they needed to add defensive solidity, and Cian O'Sullivan went into a sweeper role, and after that, Dublin became unbeatable. But Jim McGuinness did it, really. He made them stop and think.
And how did Jim McGuinness's team get on in an All-Ireland final that year? Didn't win it. I just think...
Irrespective.
To be fair, that is actually kind of an irrelevant thing that I just said, and I'll accept that, because we're just talking about the All-Ireland semi-final here.
Yeah.
But my point is not to knock this thing as a great achievement. I think it is hugely significant. I just think in the top 16...
hey, here's Tommy, what are you doing?
Studio.
What have we got?
Christmas
on the outside is chocolate, and underneath the chocolate,
oh, this is this a classic piece of television there that got going on?
What is this?
This is Catch. This is Christmas wishes from all of Catch. Thank you very much to the Catch team for sending in some of these chocolate bars. I've never had a Catch bar.
I couldn't hear a word you were saying. I was listening to the tune.
What is the tune?
Having a Pavlovian moment here.
What is the tune?
Crispy on the outside, creamy on the inside.
That does sound delicious.
So this is because you were reviewing chocolate bars in Japan. It's become a thing, Owen.
Has it? Oh, well, like I've never had a Catch bar, so I guess it is.
You're going to be the most influential man in Irish confectionery.
Well, to anybody who hasn't similarly had a Catch bar, I will do the hard work for you so that you don't have to, or maybe it'll be so nice that you do have to. Still crispy, still creamy, still got it. It says here in the front. Is this a nostalgic thing? Still got it?
I think
you seem to be coming with.
They're Irish.
They're what age?
They're Irish. I didn't realise that. All right. They're exclusive to Ireland. So it's saying here that they were first made in 1976 at the HB Chocolates Factory in Tala. Soft caramel and crisp rice covered milk chocolate.
This is quite the box. Thank you very much again. Oh, look at this. This is very impressive packaging. Feels like Easter eggs, except it's not Easter, it's Christmas, and their catch bars, not Easter eggs. Catch, soft caramel and crisp rice and milk chocolate. I'm not going to lie, this sounds amazing. How have I never had one of these before? I've seen them kind of flirtatiously sitting there on the rack in Spar.
Have you?
And always kind of opted for a Boost instead or something like that. Not anymore.
I would say I haven't seen them around in a long time.
They look like our famous Lion Bar. I know it's not doing any favours to actually compare them to anything else. It's very early in the day as well for chocolate. Don't try this at home, kids. 9:09. All air good. Whole hair good. It really is. It's not false advertising. It really is soft caramel and crispy rice in milk chocolate. Soft on the inside, hard on the outside. A little bit of Rice Krispie in the middle. It's like when you make Rice Krispie buns at home, but then just inject a little bit of heaven into the middle. Thank you, Catch. Very happy Christmas to you.
Your work here is done.
Oh,
right.
That's really good.
10 minutes past 9 this Tuesday morning. Late last week, sports writer and author Ewan MacKenna joined me in studio for a chat about his new book, Chaos is a Friend of Mine, The Life and Crimes of Conor McGregor. We did also talk about rugby, which we'll play another day. We're just going to play the McGregor bit here. The full piece is going to be podcast later on today and up on youtube.com/off the ball. First, here's Ewan on Conor McGregor and his new book. Chaos is a Friend of Mine is a new book by Ewan MacKenna, and the subtitle is The Life and Crimes of Conor McGregor. I'm delighted to say Ewan is here with us in the studio. How are you doing?
Pleasure, Jar. Very good.
You've obviously been working on this for about 18 months, 2 years, is that right?
18 months, I'd say, yeah, roughly.
When was the decision to use McGregor as a mirror to Ireland, the idea, when did that come about?
Well, the publisher came to me about 2 years ago, because I'd obviously written quite a few columns about McGregor's rise and I suppose his moralistic fall, and they suggested a kind of biography. And the more I delved into him, I didn't think a simple biography did him justice, because I think he's bigger than just an MMA star. I thought he was a representation of a very imperfect time and place in society and a societal collapse and all of these things. So I wanted to use him as a projection of so much going on around him.
Specific to Ireland or just general?
No, in general. I mean, I would have thought a right-wing shift. Obviously, you know, I lived in Brazil and you've Bolsonaro there, you've Trump in America, you've Erdogan in Turkey, you've Duterte in the Philippines. And even in Ireland, we see last week with the by-elections, I mean, there's these right-wingers popping up and it's growing. And he kind of fitted into that strongman, angry, nationalistic, thuggish loudmouth that they love. And I don't think that's where he started out. I think he would have been anything people wanted him to be, so long as they paid for it, and that's what they created.
You talked about him being Play-Doh in our hands, and in everybody's hands, really. But how much of this do you put down to his own creation? How much of it is actually something that was created by him as opposed to the forces around him?
There's a bit of that. I mean, I guess it would have started when he saw there was an opportunity. I interviewed him in 2013 after his first UFC win, and I met him in a car park in McDonald's on the Long Mile Road. And he was roguish back then, but he was a nice fella, interesting fella, wanted to talk about the philosophy of fighting, the history of fighting, all these different arts around the world in terms of fighting. And then he called his girlfriend for a lift home because he didn't fancy the 2 mile walk, didn't have a bean really at that stage. And he was roguish and he knew how to play the game. I mean, he was quite clever, but around that time he went on the Late Late Show. And having interviewed him, I remember him going on, and I thought they could have gone so many interesting ways in that interview.
Who was?
Ryan Tubridy.
Right, okay.
And it was kind of a clown act, and you're like an Ali from Dublin, and he'd say something funny and the crowd would cheer, and it was kind of cheap and easy, and McGregor could see that was working. And I think he decided to go down that line. And it made him a lot of money, but I think it got out of control. I mean, it was fine to a point. But then when you get a guy, I suppose, when you look at his decline, when you're calling a German of Russian origin a Nazi, when you're saying dance for me boy to black people, and everyone around you is saying, that's fine, you're making money out of it, therefore it's okay. I think that can take over. I mean, I was talking to one person in his camp, and they said 3 or 4 years ago, they were in Las Vegas before a fight, and he kicked down the door of the sitting room in his boxers at 3 o'clock in the day and came in shouting, I'm the champion, I'm the greatest, I'm the champion. Just out of control ego. And I guess with him, it's interesting because it's very unfair it's too simple, I think, to say, like at the beginning, everyone, if I was saying this wouldn't end well, people were, you're just a begrudger, you're just negative. And a lot of those same people have flipped, and when I say now it's deeper than just you're calling the guy a scumbag, you're saying that's too simple. There's cause and effect to this.
Go on. So give us those deeper layers. Why is it too simple? What are the other forces at work that you're actually talking about?
Well, I wanted to delve into in this era because I suppose in terms of celebrity, there were no major studies. I remember talking to Wright Thompson of ESPN about this before the book. And he said, in the world of social media, there have been no major or detailed studies or delving into the idea of what it's like to be a celebrity in a world of Twitter and Facebook and all these things where you create someone and you have to keep being them. And that was fine. That always existed to an extent through magazine interviews or TV, but that was for an hour here or an hour there. Whereas now, if you're a celebrity, it's constant access and you have to keep constantly being that person. And the person McGregor chose to be was right on the edge, out of control, crazy, to the point that his salvation was actually getting in a cage fighting. And it was away from that it was problematic. And it was like he held up a mask and one day he took it down and there was nothing left behind it. And to constantly 24/7 for your customers, for your audience, to be this lunatic, to be this outrageous guy, to be abusive, to be arrogant, to do that 24/7, you eventually become that.
You mentioned Wright Thompson there. He had a very negative response to the piece that he wrote in ESPN, and I don't know if that's where the idea of having him write the prologue to the book comes from, but he actually addresses that and how it shook him quite a little bit. So if people remember the piece, he wrote about Crumlin and basically it was a ghetto.
He said, I think one line, and it was changed by an editor and he got a lot of abuse for it, was that men bringing their dates home couldn't go all the way to wherever, be it Trimna, they had to change buses and go a different way, and it made it out like it was kind of Compton in the 80s or something like this. And it was changed, but a lot of people, that was a really good article in many ways. That line, no. That paragraph, no. But the rest of that article, which was 3,000-4,000 words long, nailed it. And people just wanted something to be outraged by, and that's a silly line. And they missed the rest of it, which was kind of Crumlin to Crumlin with a fairy tale in between. And it looked at the factors, it kind of started delving into the factors that shape someone and how we build them up and how we break them down in this era. And nobody got that. Everybody just wanted to look at this one line of outrage, which was kind of a Twitter line almost that people could give out about.
So were you pushing an open door when you talked to him about asking him to write the prologue for this?
Yeah, he was, and lovely guy. I have to say, I mean, I've always been a big fan of Wright's writing, but he's really humble and quite shy. And then he sent the foreword to the book, and he was, is that okay? You can change what you want. And it was quite weird to see someone who's so good be almost so insecure about their own writing.
The stuff that he addresses in that is the importance of like veracity and how he wanted that to be the case. And I guess it's kind of the perfect thing for the precursor to a book where you are about to talk about Irish life and Irish society. What are your conclusions about, when you dive into that? So we don't have that many of these celebrities really in our midst. We have very few. There's probably about 5 or 6 maybe, and then a bunch of others who maybe I'm too old to know about. What are your conclusions when you come to that? Or what are the causes and the effects of this?
Well, it's very unhealthy. I mean, it's not natural to be that guy. I interviewed a guy called Dave Hill who he fought at the beginning when he was still in Cage Warriors, way back before the UFC years. And Dave was talking to me about how, like, a lot of fighters would talk themselves up, and he could tell that it was bullshit, basically, that they're just trying to build it up. They're just trying to build up their own ego and make themselves believe. And then he met him on stage, and McGregor goes at him and he's shoving his face into him and he's pushing him, and he realised at that moment, he said, this guy is actually unhinged. And you take a guy like that who's kind of that way around fighting, and then he realises that can sell if he's like that all the time. And I suppose to answer your question, the whole effect of it, it's really not healthy. I mean, it's the kind of the Greek tragedy of building someone up and up and up, and then when we get bored of that story, you can't be outrageous forever, because if everything's outrageous, nothing's outrageous. Then you break them back down and you want the fallen hero at the end of it, and it's quite grim. And it's a kind of a story we've seen in boxing over and over again, but it's just accelerated and kind of enhanced in this era.
Yeah, the accelerated culture of the now. Why do we as a country do it? Why did we fall prey to the charms of McGregor at that point?
Idiocy. I mean, I know that might sound harsh, but when you look back at some of McGregor's interviews and you look back at the reaction to them, and there was this idea that he was, like, he should be on a coin. Remember that petition that went to the Oireachtas?
I don't remember that petition.
Yeah, it was debated in the Oireachtas, because a petition went in with, I think, 100,000 signatures that he should be on a coin. was on the Late Late 4 or 5 times. He was seemingly this hilarious character. He was all these things. And you look back, he wasn't funny.
I can see the Late Late, right? Because, you're a producer, you want to book a guest who's very famous and who you probably can't get that often, so you take him whenever you can get him, and then,
it is lowest common denominator, though, because he brings in an audience, so we bring him on more, so his audience get bigger, and it's a race to the bottom.
They have people on who talk about angels, who are like, tarot card, basically. They'll have anybody on who they think is going to fill a slot for them. So, I don't, but it's the level of support that he had at such a deep and indoctrinated level of supporter.
Well, there's an anger, I would suggest, out there, and we've seen it. We've had it in America, we've had it in the UK, and kind of their culture drips down, and we eventually get it here, and we're seeing that with our politics, with Noel Grealish and Verona Murphy and all these people. There's an anger, and when people are angry, I guess, they look for things to blame, and they look for things to cling to, and it's often the wrong things. And with McGregor, it's like, that guy is angry, he's shouting, he's showing us how we can behave, he's kind of pointing out, you're this, you're that, you're that. And it's an easy thing to cling to when you're angry. And he was kind of the perfect guy for the time and place in that regard, and I think a lot of people bought into that.
Is that gone? Is that core support gone, or is it? Because it seems like, if you think back to like the heyday of Ricky Hatton, and in Vegas the big thing was that it was an extension of cricket's Barmy Army. It was boxing's version of that. There was a little bit of that for a few fights. Certainly one of the summer ones where it felt like a lot of J1ers had gone to Vegas for the fight. That seems to have dwindled quite significantly, or is it still there? I don't know. I suppose we'll find out in January.
There's always a hardcore that have been there since the beginning. I think for 2 reasons it's probably dwindled. One, I think the Mayweather fight was the end of his MMA career in a way, in that he got all this money, the hunger goes. It's not a natural thing to want to get into a cage and kind of choke someone's air supply or have yours when you don't have the money.
So I'm not talking so much about this. I suppose I misframed my question. Are the angry people just going somewhere else?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're still there. You can say, well, they're going into politics. You look at they're going in everywhere. Racist abuse is up. Peter Casey in the last presidential election goes from 2% to 23% because he has a go at travellers. We see Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael last week running in the by-elections. Candidates have said outrageous things. Yeah, they're just going to other places and they're becoming hardened and entrenched. And something else will come along that will catch their eye and they'll use that vehicle next.
Chaos is a friend of mine, is a Bob Dylan quote, right?
Yeah.
Why pick that? Who was that? Has he said that? Is that something?
No, I just always liked it, and I thought it kind of suited him because his life has been chaotic. And as I said to you, I think when your salvation is cage fighting, when that's your normality and when you're in trouble away from that, it's quite a weird thing to find your salvation, and it's not a healthy thing, I guess.
Has somebody replaced him in Irish society? Will somebody replace him in Irish society in that role of the totemic figure that a certain generation of young Irishmen see as this weird, perfect embodiment of,
He may be once in a generation, the kind of Roy Keane style thing, it's very hard. He was the first to do it. We've never seen anything like that in Ireland. We may never have had a sports person that big in terms of America, ever.
What's the Keane comparison?
Well, someone to cling to. There was a generation of Irish people who loved Roy Keane for a very different reason. This kind of, this is the new Ireland. This guy is taking no crap on the football field. McGregor kind of embodied something a little bit after that. Further confidence, again, outspoken, loud-mouthed, brash. And that kind of suited. It was kind of the post-Celtic Tiger era. This was the Celtic Tiger generation. We're Ireland, we're here.
Yeah, it's not really. It turns out we're not very good at that, I would say.
No, and we keep talking about how we need to be more confident, and it's kind of got to the stage when you're being Irish abroad, like even out for the Khabib fight in Vegas, when the McGregor fans started arriving out, the journalists who were Irish kind of started hiding their passports, because we didn't want to be associated or recognised, and we've this perception of Irishness abroad that everyone loves us, where we're actually, you're kind of stepping away from a lot of Irish people at this stage.
Yeah, certainly. There's been those places the Australians were not that keen on, especially the J1ers and the ones on holiday. What was the behaviour around the Khabib fight in particular that kind of made you just take a step back and go, this isn't right?
Well, there was the riot after. The build-up, there was fights and scuffles between men and women at the weigh-in. There was this kind of just up and down the Vegas Strip, there was "fuck the Jemison brothers" ringing out, which was McGregor's quote all the time, and just this kind of ego all the time. And after the fight, obviously the riots break out, and I remember in the lobby there was a young fella who spat at a Dagestani guy, and your man threw a punch and just knocked him out, and his jaw went like that. And I was kind of, people saw that, oh, it's incredible, get a video of that, all this. And I was kind of thinking, can you imagine that guy, he's probably in America for a weekend with no health insurance. He's going to wake up tomorrow with a 20 grand medical bill, and he's going to be ringing home for this. And even outside of that, the Papak, I think it's called, the white hats that Khabib wears from his part of the world, all his fans were wearing them. And they were surrounded by police. And there was all these young, angry Irish fellas trying to get at them and saying, oh, the police are there to protect you, blah, blah, blah. It was completely the opposite. The police were there to protect all these Irish thugs.
Why? What was there, like, it's so alien, right? It's like, it's not really, we didn't ever have a proper hooligan culture in any of our sports. What were they trying to do?
It's a mimicking of McGregor. And I suppose MMA does fit into that. It didn't help that Khabib's team jumped in the ring. And
you talked about the mask and there being nothing behind it. Ultimately, was that not just all part of the plan to get rich? Was that not all just part of the plan to mobilise a bunch of people who would be your acolytes, who would create the atmosphere, who would mean that the events become better? So
I think initially, but that can go too far. I mean, what's the balance between having some semblance of sanity and 50 million in the bank, or having $500 million in the bank and being completely out of control? I think initially it was a plan that worked, but Paddy Houlihan, I think his book is out at the minute. I heard him talking last week, and he was talking about kind of John Kavanagh and McGregor and the Straight Blast Gym, and how for 3 or 4 years this thing was just at full speed, and no one ever stopped for a minute at any point and said, let's reevaluate, where are we go next? And it just became out of control, and that was McGregor too.
Yeah. So in terms of the actual sport, where do you think it stands now? Because, you know, there are young fighters coming through who definitely see that career path. But you would hope at some point too are thinking, okay, I see that the Paddy Houlihan point. Does the sport have a future in Ireland, do you think?
To a point. I mean, when you have someone as big as McGregor that comes along, and yet behind it, how big is MMA in Ireland, really? It's not. I mean, and it's never really grown outside Brazil, America. You know, one star Khabib will grow it slightly.
Yeah.
It's limited. It really is limited. And without McGregor, I mean, guys might make a living from it. Guys might win at it. But, I mean, fundamentally, it's never going to be mainstream, I don't think.
Any conclusions about where Ireland is going from now, as opposed to him specifically, but more about the country?
To a bad place. I mean, walking around Dublin when I come home troubles me greatly every time. Coming in here, walking over more and more homeless people, walking into pubs where the pints are more expensive and people are having a great time and salaries for some are going up, and it's not good. I mean, it's a really divided society.
That's what the book is about, really, isn't it?
Well, it's him as a reflection of that society, yeah, and money being everything above morals, and what this society does to people, and how we're shaping society, and it's him as a mirror of all of that.
And what stops that ever?
I think we're in terminal decline. People keep saying, and it's an arrogance of humans. I mean, George Carlin has a great quote about kind of people saying, save the planet, save the planet. He says the planet will be fine, it's us who are in big trouble. And I think fundamentally that's where we're headed, and people will go, that's negative. But I think there's an arrogance that we can somehow flick a switch and get out of a society in a bad shape.
Yeah, no, I mean, so if it wasn't to flick a switch, if there were things that we could begin, if there were conversations we could begin to have, what should they be?
I think we need to question things more. I don't think we question things enough. I think too much is just taken with a shrug of the shoulders, and that's the way it is. I think marketing and media tell people how to think so much that they don't question it enough.
Do people not really have their own ability to watch stuff and go, I don't agree with that?
There's a laziness. It's kind of like the Wall-E spaceship, where you kind of get a choice between a red and a blue jumper, and you're quite happy with that. People are not questioning stuff. They're going for the easy option. It's why all light entertainment is taking over. It's why reality TV is taking over, because people don't want to question things. People don't want the hard stuff.
See, you say that though, but like, there's never been better TV made than there is now. If you watch the quality of work that goes into Succession, I haven't seen the latest Scorsese flick yet, but it's 3.5 hours long. It's demanding people's attention. Box sets are actually asking you to delve into something and commit hundreds of hours to watching it. The OJ documentary is a piece of art.
But it's amidst so much other stuff. I mean, it's just, there's so much being produced. And
does that not give you hope that this good stuff is actually out there? And if you go looking for it, and if you're willing to flick the TV off, that actually it's pretty easy for you not to watch any reality TV. It's pretty easy for you now to find a tribe of people who will sit and communicate with you. And the means to communicate and to build communities around good quality work is actually, it's right there for all of us.
Well, put it this way, the guy I interviewed for the book, he's a professor in Emory University in Atlanta, in Georgia, or just outside Atlanta, and he wrote a book 10 years ago called The Dumbest Generation. And he looked at how SAT scores in America, reading levels, critical thought, all these things had fallen. And I interviewed him last year, and he said it's 11 years since the book, Ewan, and I thought we'd reached a low ebb then. And statistically in America, we've fallen through the floor since that point. You see it in Ireland with kind of leaving in junior cert papers. Rather than kind of let people get lesser scores, they're lessening the quality of the papers they're doing. And I mean, it's statistically, it's a decline. And Richard Dawkins, remember being in the late in the early 2000s, someone in the audience asked him, do you know, evolution, where's it going to take us? Are we going to grow wings, like this sort of thing? And he said, no, we're in a phase of devolution we may never come out of.
Yeah, look, I get that. I mean, but I don't think academic results, maybe we've got a little bit smarter about analysing life and saying that academic results isn't the be-all and end of it.
But have we, though? Look around. I mean, when I say most people are idiots, people go, oh, how can you say that? And I say, look around. This is what we're creating. We're creating a more divided society, a more angry society, where more people can't afford homes, where all these things. That's not a sign of intelligence. And people, that's the government. We elect them. And this is kind of a representation of our thought. McGregor is a representation of our thought.
So you think this is all ultimately we're going to get the world we deserve, right? Like we get the politicians we deserve, is the old aphorism, and that's true. And that ultimately that the direction that we're going because of the choices we make is going to kill ourselves.
I do, I think, and it's exponential at this point. I mean, I think each decision we're making gives us less chance of coming out of this slide. I wouldn't have a 2-year-old nephew now. I know you've a kid. I wouldn't like to be growing up right now in Ireland or in a lot of countries, and I'd worry, I mean, it's a lot tougher now, and it's not a great place.
It's funny, I probably would have thought that, but then you have kids and you start to see the world slightly differently, a little bit through their eyes, and actually it's not that bad if phones, for example, there's a move to reject phones, which is, I think, about to take off in quite a serious way, where we might end up having phones the same way we think of smartphones, the way we think of cigarettes. You've got to be 16, you've got to be 18 or whatever. I think that there are things that we can do collectively if we sit down and go, why are we giving people access to the worst forms of whatever's available on the internet at the age of 12 and saying that's fine, you're okay to deal with that when their brains aren't fully formed? There is a way back, I would say, from all of this if we actually start to have conversations.
I do, but I think I agree. But I think there's a chunk of society that's being forgotten about out there below those conversations that aren't being given those choices. I look at the sports grants, for example, that were handed out again, and we look at golf and tennis clubs. And I know you can't pigeonhole people by class directly into sport, but when private golf clubs are getting more and boxing clubs aren't getting anything. Back in 2011, I did a series of stories for the Irish Examiner about sport on the fringes of society, and I went to Neilstown Boxing Club, I went to Moyross Soccer Club in Limerick, and I went to Caritas College in Ballyfermot. And like being there, there was an under-16 girls basketball team, and it was kind of helping with self-harm, teenage pregnancy, all these things. We'll talk about, these kids shouldn't be using these phones, these kids should, but I do think there's a growing chunk of society that aren't part of that conversation, aren't getting access to that. And I think they're being forgotten about in Ireland.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.